Sorry, now we're ready to go. Sorry, we're a little late starting tonight. We had a work session before, and it's always goes a little long. So welcome to the August 29th Planning Commission meeting. And Liz, do you want to do roll call?
Commissioner Miranda. Commissioner Lee. Commissioner Thorson.
Present.
Commissioner Strauss.
Here.
Commissioner Nemerov.
Here.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Here.
Commissioner Berube. Here. Chair Olson.
Here. Thank you. Next is to approve the agenda. Were there any edits to the agenda or a motion to approve?
I move approval of the agenda as submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Now we have minutes from, the August 15th Planning Commission meeting. Were there any edits? I know that you had a couple that you submitted.
You want me to explain them?
Sure, if you want.
Okay.
So the edits I had were on the final page, page 10 of 10. And this is regarding the 7200, 7250 France project. The last bullet, the final three lines, I've asked for a couple of changes. The third to final sentence, or the second to final sentence in the third to final line says, DeVos replied that a slip lane with a barrier may prevent that possible trees. And I think Liz was going to look to see, I think there's some words missing there. I mean, so we'll fix that up to, because I think there was, Dean had agreed, but I think there's some words missing. And then the next sentence, I suggest putting that in a separate bullet and just saying that, and I rewrote that to say that we were saying that success of the project, or that a critical factor for project approval may be obtaining access with the permission of the county off of France Avenue. And making that a separate bullet.
I'll move approval of the minutes as amended.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you. All right, we have 5 public hearings tonight. And the first one is a variance request for 6412 Indian Hills Road.
Right. Tonight, the subject property is approximately 16,785 square feet in area, and the existing home is a multi-level home built in 1959. There are 2 variances requested for the property, and the property being 6412 Indian Hills Road. One for increasing the existing nonconforming front yard setback, and another to increase the first floor height beyond the 1 foot allowed for new construction. The applicant is proposing to tear down and rebuild on the lot, and the existing structure does not meet the required front yard setback of 52.75 feet. The existing front yard setback, or the proposed front yard setback, will be at 34.96 feet from the lot line, and the requested variance would improve on that existing nonconforming front yard setback of the original home. Currently, the house sits 30.2 feet from what would be considered the front property line, and the applicant is requesting a 34.96 foot setback. The existing home is a multi-level home with a first floor elevation of 903.2. The property owner is requesting to increase the first floor height by 5.4 feet or 4.4 feet higher than allowed by ordinance to bring the home and grade around the home up closer to the level of the adjacent homes. The subject lot is a low point with a lower elevations than the existing properties on either side. The objective is to raise the elevations on the lot to be higher than the existing property so that they will be more similar to the surrounding properties but no higher than those adjacent neighboring grades, and therefore not affecting current drainage patterns. The subject property currently has been unoccupied for some time. The applicant's plan is to tear down and rebuild on the property with a one-story, and they propose a one-story rambler with an attached three-car garage. The property is the low spot between the neighboring properties, with both adjacent neighbors along Indian Hills Road at higher elevations. The existing first floor of the house is at 903.2, with a walkout level of the home that's 5.1 feet to 4.4 feet higher than the existing first floor, and is not a full floor under the existing first floor today. The property owner would like to maintain the walkout elevation of the new basement, and an increase in ceiling height would be required, and is a driver of the variance for the request to have a true full basement. The proposed new home will have a basement elevation of 898.2, which matches the existing low floor of the home today. To match the low floor requires a greater increase in the first floor elevation than the 1 foot requirement of the code. The existing front yard setback of the house is along Indian Hills is 30.2 feet. The required front yard setback is determined by the front yard setback of the adjacent neighbors on either side of the home. The existing home has always been closer to the street than the other homes to the north and the south, and the setback of the subject house to the front lot is currently non-conforming today. The proposed project will place the home farther from the front line than the existing home today. So today the house sits at 30.2 feet. The applicant is proposing for the new front yard setback to be 34.9 feet. Any grading must not impact any adjacent neighbors, and the environmental engineer has reviewed the application and submitted a memo which was included in your packet. Tonight, the practical difficulty is that the subject home was built in 1959 and is located closer to the front lot line than the current average. The home complied with setbacks at the time of construction, but the home to the south was rebuilt farther back from their lot line than the original house on that lot, which has increased the required setback today. The home is a multi-level home that was built in a low spot with the lowest level of the home, not a full floor, with a full of the home, not a full floor below the existing first floor. So to maintain the lower level walkout requires a higher first floor to allow for a full basement. The increase in the first floor height, which is greater than the 1 foot increase, if allowed, will still be 4.4 feet lower than the first floor of the home to the south, and 5.7 feet lower than the floor of the first floor to the home to the north. The ordinance was written to avoid reconstructed new first floors at a much higher elevation than adjacent homes, and the proposed new first floor maintains the spirit and intent of the ordinance by not elevating the proposed new floor higher than existing first floor elevations of their neighbors. The existing house has a non-conforming front yard setback along the west side of the house, and the new home will be farther from the front line than the existing home. The site is at a low point between the neighbors and will remain lower with a new finished grade. The change in grade will not impact drainage patterns in the area, and granting the variance will not alter the character of the neighborhood. The proposed home is a rambler with the overall height below the maximum allowed, and that measurement is measured from the average existing grade. Tonight, the recommended action is to approve a 17.79 foot front yard setback variance from the west property line and a 4.4 foot first floor height variance at 6412 Indian Hills Road, subject to the findings and conditions listed in the staff report.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for staff?
I've got a quick one.
Okay, Commissioner Strauss.
These projects, where the road curves always present, we've come up, and that setback is determined again by the homes on the same side of the street,
Yes.
north and south?
Yes. You can see the Indian Hills Road curving,
Yeah,
and
there's
then
not a straight
it's,
line there.
Yep, and it's the average of these two homes.
Yeah, okay, that's fine, thank you.
Commissioner Nemiroff, did you have?
Yeah, thanks. I had a similar question. Regarding that west setback. Could you explain a little bit more about the why the setback variance is needed and the impact on the neighboring homes?
So the west side is considered the front property line, so this would be considered the front property line at this home. And the setback is the average of this home to the south and the average setback of the property to the north.
Okay, so the west is the street facing?
Yes.
And the east, north, and south setbacks are code compliant?
Yes, this would be considered a yard setback as well as the north property line, and then this would be considered the rear yard.
Thank you, Emily.
Commissioner Berube?
So, again, just to clarify, so what we're asking for here, what the applicant is asking for is instead of having 52.75 on the west side, have the 32.96, but in fact, that still gives more than 4 feet more than what they currently have.
Correct.
So it's an improvement over what they currently have.
Yep,
but it's
an
out of
improvement in the
compliance.
non-conforming setback.
Got it. Thank you.
Commissioner Lee?
I'm sorry if I missed this, but was there a reason why the structure could not be built within the buildable area of the current setbacks? Did you have you had a diagram that showed that?
Don't think they had.
Usually when we see this, it's like it turns into a sliver of a piece that's buildable, so it's clear why they need to expand beyond the actual setback. This is a full tear down, correct?
Yes.
Okay. So generally, when we're looking at full tear downs, the assumption is now you would build it to current setback standards, unless there's some reason why, as I mentioned before, it ends up being a ridiculous sliver of land or unusual shape.
I don't know that we
think
had the
that
graph.
would be the case in this. In order to meet that front yard setback, the house would have to be pushed back into the lot, and you can see it's kind of triangular in shape. And then they would they wouldn't meet the side setbacks. The building envelope shrinks as the home gets pushed to the back.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Would the applicant like to speak? And just please come to one of the sides, and you can just state your name and address.
Do I need to push any of these buttons, or does it do it itself? Okay. Okay, it's still red, but we'll give it a shot. Oh, perfect. That's sophisticated. I'm Sarah Dye. I live currently at 6820 Creston Road, but I am the owner of 6412 Indian Hills Road, along with my family, who are here with me to see the government and city planning commission in action. I appreciate your time today. I know that you guys have a very busy agenda, so we appreciate you giving us a few minutes on your agenda. We are the owners, as you can tell, in Indian Hills. If anybody's been out there, these lots are very irregular. The roads are curvy. The neighbor to the south of us has a very big property. The neighbor to the north of us has a bigger property than us. We have a pie-shaped property, as you indicated. And so we spent a bunch of time talking to our engineer and our survey crew to figure out how do we put something on this lot that we think will keep the integrity of the neighborhood and really look like something that would fit in. So we spent a bunch of time doing that. We've talked to the neighbors. The home has been vacant for 2 years. They're very excited for us to come in and to do something better with the property. And we gave it a lot of thought. So hopefully you guys saw that in the application that we submitted, and we're happy to take any further questions if that's appropriate, or if you need any other information. But we just thank you for the time and the consideration that you're giving us today, and let us know if you need anything else. I don't think it ever... Maybe it did go green, but I think I beat my 3 minutes.
You're fine.
Thank you.
Ray, are there any questions for the applicant? Commissioner Lee?
Just a sense that those illustrations with the glued on, it doesn't work very well. So if you really are trying to show the relationship between your adjacent neighbors, try to aim for something that's a little more realistic, I think would be helpful.
All right, so this is a public hearing. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to speak? Hearing none.
I move to close the public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. So bring it back to the Planning Commission. Are there any other comments or motion?
One small comment.
Sure.
Make a motion to, so first of all, I just want to point out one thing, that it looks like this property is going to decrease, this development looks like it's going to decrease the amount of impervious surface. So I just want to call that out because that's a nice thing. That's a good thing. And with that, I personally am ready to propose or move to approve, but I don't want to foreclose discussion, but move to approve subject to the typical conditions in the memo. So that's my piece.
Open up for discussion.
You know, I would not oppose this. They are actually improving the space of the setback, and it looks like a beautiful home that's going to fit in well with the neighborhood. The impervious area is a positive, as you mentioned, and I don't see any reason to not approve this.
Any other discussion? So, okay, Commissioner Lee.
I did not have a lot of time to review this, but anytime I do see significant changes to the contours that end steeply at the property line, I just want to note that that rarely works in practice, because as we know, water doesn't follow a property line. So granted, it's also very steep. It's a kind of a hilly area. I do feel that there will be some significant changes in the way the water flows. But having seen that, it looks or appears that it has received a review by the 9 Mile Creek Watershed District, and they have put a lot of constraints on that. I will abide by what they have concluded.
Just to follow up on your comment, if I'm reading the engineering memo correctly, this is a low spot, so I don't think it's going off.
Yeah, the concern is, in order to bring it up 5 feet, you have to bring in some fill. So anytime you bring it up that much, it does change the grade significantly and changes the drainage patterns. Obviously, the goal is not to change the runoff from the site significantly, and that's the part I think that was evaluated by the district and all. So, but there will be changes as far as how this site actually sits, and it drains on the property itself. So.
All right, so we have a motion and a second. So, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Have fun. So next on the agenda is another variance for Interlaken Country Club at 6200 Interlaken Boulevard. Carrie.
Commission. As mentioned, this is located at the Interlaken Country Club up in the northwest corner of the city. The country club's been doing a number of improvements to the club, and those improvements have caused the need for the variance that's before you. To give you a little background, what you're seeing right here is the new maintenance facility. It was built, 4 or 5 years ago. The old maintenance facility used to be located across the pond right here. That's been removed, and that's the subject area where they're proposing a variance to add some parking stalls. Here's an old photograph that shows that old maintenance building located on the south side of the wetland there. This is a look of the existing parking lot. So they have a tennis court area here, and the main clubhouse is to the right. Currently, users of the club walk through the parking lot to get from one use to the other. And that's where the improvements are proposed. They're making a number of improvements to the tennis court area, and they'd like to create a walking path separated from the parking lot, a safe and comfortable pedestrian connection to the clubhouse. Where they're losing parking stalls, they'd like to replace generally where that old maintenance facility used to be. With that area, again, there's the pond that's located just to the north, and we require a 50-foot setback from that pond. The facility those parking stalls would be 34 feet back from that wetland, so they need a variance of 16 feet. That old maintenance building was actually closer to the pond than the proposed parking stalls. So again, here's that parking or the tennis area. They're doing some improvements there, and again, the connection to the clubhouse. Closer look at, you can see the separation from the parking lot to provide that. So in this case, staff believes that the variance criteria is met. Practical difficulties on the site are it's an existing parking lot, clubhouse being where it is, the tennis court being where it is. There's no room to add those parking stalls that they're losing, with the exception of the area where that old maintenance facility used to be. This area right in here, there's some steep slopes that would cause some problems for adding parking stalls in that location. Again, the parking stalls are further away from the wetland than the old maintenance building. It doesn't encroach within the 30-foot buffer that's required by the watershed district. And again, the purpose is to provide that safer pedestrian crossing. So staff does support the variance, subject to the findings and conditions that are outlined in your staff report. And I can stand for questions.
Thank you, Carrie. Questions for Carrie? Go ahead.
Is the parking lot visible to neighboring residences?
Let's see if I go back. Boy, it would be difficult. So there are some homes off Maloney where that could be visible across the pond, potentially, to those homes. Again, they're looking at an existing parking lot today.
That's the rest of the last page, the last paragraph. First page of BKBM's report. There's only one other property adjacent to the pond located west-northwest of the tennis courts. Headlights from cars parking should not adversely affect this property given the heavy vegetation.
Yes, so as you can see, there is vegetation along just to the north of the parking lot and then on the other side of the pond also.
Commissioner Thorson.
Oh, yeah, Director Teague, so the restriction was from the watershed district, right, requiring...
The 30-foot buffer, correct.
The 30-foot buffer was their condition, and they approved the changes, right? So, I mean, that's basically what we're talking about is...
Correct.
That, and they, who are looked after their interests, have
right, they
said
need
they're
a
okay.
permit
So,
from the watershed district,
yeah,
and that was their condition.
Pretty cut and dried then. Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? I guess I have a quick question. Oh, go ahead. You go ahead.
Once again, to follow up Commissioner Strauss, the purpose of the Edina 50-foot setback, as I understand, is to deal with stormwater issues, which the engineering department has separately determined are fine with the proposal as done. And as I understand, and please correct me if I'm wrong about any of my assumptions I'm making here, the purpose of the watershed district is to deal with environmental factors, and they've approved it.
That's correct.
Everything I said is everything I said correct, Carrie?
Yeah, the 50-foot setback is the city's requirement to all wetlands, ponds, streams, for aesthetics, keeping buildings away from wetlands, and addressing environmental concerns as well.
The 50 is the city's 50 is for environmental also, but if the watershed district's okay with 30, the city will be okay with 30?
We would be 36 in this case. Yep.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Carrie.
My question is just on the number of parking. So I think what they're doing is, admirable to make it more safe for the pedestrians, but do they need to replace those 16 stalls, or does the city have a requirement that they're trying to maintain, or is it just that?
It's more based on the needs of the club.
Okay.
They feel that they need to replace those
Okay.
parking stalls.
All right.
They're actually losing more stalls than they're gaining.
Okay. I guess that's it. Thank you. Would the applicant like to speak? You don't have to, but is there anyone there? No? All right. This is also a public hearing. Is there anyone from the public who'd like to speak on this variance? Nope. So,
Move to close the public hearing.
is there a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries.
I'm not sure they're going to
So bring it back to the Planning Commission. Other comments? Commissioner Thorson?
I move approval of the variance, subject to the conditions and findings outlined in the staff memo.
Second.
Second. Is there any discussion? Commissioner? No.
I actually have a question for the applicants about the parking. If it's the applicants, my understanding is even when the club is not, is an applicant representative here? I won't ask the question, I guess. All right. Well, my understanding is that parking lot is filled many days, even when there are not like national championships being held there. I don't know if other people have. That's other people's observations too. Okay, that's the need, I guess.
Yeah, I was hoping the applicant would be here too. I was wondering if any of their employees use bicycles to get to work or anything, if they have any sort of bicycle parking, or if they could use one of the spots to have that sort of thing. But I guess we don't know. So, because the Southwest Light Rail station is going to be about a mile away. So in the future, you can see a lot of, potential, maybe not golfers. But although there are golf bikes, but yeah, it would be nice to know if they could do that sort of thing.
Or you could put that as a recommendation or get in the meeting notes.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Had the discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, so the third variance request is for 5428 Halifax Lane.
So tonight, the applicant is requesting to increase the first floor elevation 3.5 feet higher than the current home's first floor elevation in order to construct a new home at 5428 Halifax Avenue, or Halifax Lane, excuse me. 5428 Halifax Lane is approximately 17,000 square feet in area and is located on the west side of Halifax Lane, east of Minnehaha Creek, and is located in the floodplain. The City of Edina's engineering standards require that the basement elevation of a new home be 2 feet higher than the FEMA base flood elevation, and the requirement for increased height in basement elevation impacts the applicant's ability for the project to conform to the maximum first floor height requirement of 1 foot. The existing home is a rambler that was built in 1958 prior to the FEMA floodplain study, which was conducted in 1979. It's a city and watershed district goal to evaluate and remove homes out of the flood hazard areas when the opportunity arises. A variance is requested to allow the first floor elevation of the new home to exceed the first floor elevation of the existing home by more than 1 foot. The current home at 5428 Halifax has a first floor elevation of 870.4. The established flood elevation is 861.9. And the minimum basement elevation must be no less than 2 feet above that floodplain elevation. So the minimum basement elevation for this property would be 863.9. The proposed first floor of the new home is to be at 873.92. And that leaves, with those two elevations, discounting floor trusses, spacers, and subfloor, the proposed basement ceiling height would be around 8.5 feet. The environmental engineer has reviewed the application and submitted comments that were included in your packet. The stormwater management plan associated with the project shows that the grading for the proposed work will closely match the existing drainage paths. The property will drain to Halifax Lane and Minnehaha Creek, and this project will require some stormwater mitigation, and the applicant proposes a rain garden to meet that requirement. Staff believes that this proposal meets the criteria for a variance to allow the first floor elevation to be 3.52 feet higher than the existing home for the following reasons. The proposed use is permitted in the R1 zoning district and complies with all other zoning standards. The proposed home design elevates the lowest level of the dwelling to an elevation that is 2 feet higher than the flood elevation. The variance allows the new home to be elevated out of the flood zone while complying with all other zoning requirements. And the proposed home design fits in with the character of the neighborhood. Tonight, staff's recommendation is to approve the variance as requested, subject to the findings and conditions listed in the staff report. And will be here for any questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you. Are there questions for staff? Commissioner Lee?
The finished ceiling basement height that they're requesting will be 8'6", 8'5" inches?
Yeah, 8.5 feet around.
8 feet, 5 inches. Okay. And that, they could not get that height without this variance. Is that correct? Okay, thank you.
Great. Is the applicant here? Would they like to speak? Hi, if you can, just maybe use, are you going to? Oh, okay, great. Thank you.
If that's possible.
Yeah,
Thanks
sure.
for listening to me. My name's Tony Janakakis, the homeowner there. You probably know me. I own TC Home Builders, and I do some stuff around here. I've been in front of you before a couple times for variances. So kind of do my due diligence when I started this like 3 years ago. Originally, it was going to be a remodel until they moved the floodplain a year and a half ago. If you actually look at the survey, which is the existing conditions, and if you look at the high water mark is 861.9, my basement floor is 862.2. So before I even started this process, I started with FEMA. And my half a year of my life later, they said because it was touching my house, I need to now pay for flood insurance. I asked them how water could go up 4 inches. They said, it's touching. So then I talked to Jennifer and said, Jennifer, can I just remodel a section of this? She says, well, that part had to be 2 feet up higher than the high water mark, which they switched. Okay. Then on the north side, which would be this side, there's a 10-foot easement that I had to deal with because of the stormwater drain that comes through here. We went all the way back to me and Charlie and Sunny Engineering went back to 1938. Originally, they had the storm sewer coming where my pencil is. Charlie was kind enough to send a camera down the sewer and figured out it was actually where it shows it is. So I could use that 10-foot side setback, because on this type of lot of 65 wide, you would have a 7-foot side setback. We complied with the 10-foot easement on the one side with Charlie and Chris and Emily and everybody to make this thing kind of work. So it's not the direction I necessarily wanted to take, but it was kind of my last. Had the FEMA not moved the line, I'd probably be sitting here talking about a remodel. But that's not my option right now. So then I thought to myself, as a builder in Edina, how do I make this thing so it fits into the neighborhood? So if you look at your cross-section, the house to the south, we actually sit lower than that house. The house to the north, you see a Rambler that just sold in July, and they'll be in here for a variance probably within 2 months. The difference is that that home is 100-foot wide. They have a 15-foot easement on their south side, but because they're 100-foot wide, they can go to a 35-foot ridge line. I kept mine at 29 and some change. They'll be above me. The house to the south will be above me, so technically I'll be the lowest house on the block. I've looked at this thing very many angles. Additionally, being an Edina resident since 1971, when it was the village of Edina, I've lived around this area, played in the creek area. I bought this house 17 years ago thinking, just me and my wife. 3 years ago we had Andrew. A year ago we had Nicholas. Uh-oh. It's about an 1,800 square foot Rambler, and if you know how to deal with children and toys, sometimes you need a little bigger home. So I went around to all the neighbors, like I normally do when these things arise, and I got letters from most of my neighbors. Not one has said, I don't want to see this project. I think it's hideous. I showed them the plans, showed them the direction we're taking. I also took pictures, and I don't know if you can actually right here? Is that about right? So this is the house next to me to the north. And if you look, my house sits down at the bottom of the hill along with his house. If you look at these next two houses, those ridge lines will far surpass. I should have almost gotten those drawn for you as well. I didn't think it was necessary to have all the houses on the block drawn for you. I can just tell you from my experience where I wanted this to go, and I'm asking for your approval because I think I'm meeting all the guidelines because we worked really close with engineering because if you look at the proposed survey, because you got to remember this line moved 1.5 years ago. Water's never been that high, but we have to go with what it could be. So we proposed a rain garden in the very back section of the lot, which would be right here. So we did soil tests to say, okay, if we're building in the now established FEMA floodplain, how is that going to impact the infiltration of water? How are we going to disperse that? So we came up with Sunday Engineering and Charlie's approval. This rain garden will infiltrate the water, basically, that would normally come into this area that we're building into. So we're not pushing water into somebody else's yard down the creek. Is there any questions?
Okay, Commissioner Thorson.
Yeah, sir. Okay, the rain garden was a requirement from the watershed district?
No, it's a requirement from engineering in the city of Edina.
Okay, but, so I'm Chetzer. And the plan as proposed satisfies the city?
Yes,
for-
they're
To
filling-
achieve the results you want?
Correct.
Okay, okay, that's fine, thank you.
Commissioner Lee.
Okay, so the purpose of that photograph was to show that houses, whatever that is, north of your neighbor actually sit much higher than you will sit south of that house, is that right?
Correct.
Okay.
And
So that elevation that you've drawn, though, it shows it as quite significant, what, 16 feet, something?
are you referring to the house to the north of me?
Yes, that
So
drawing right there.
this house that we're referring to, so it'd be this house here.
Right.
This house is sold and going to be, they'll be in here for a variance as well.
So what you're saying is that they're already going to be looking at a tear down possibly and.
Right, because they
building,
approached me as a builder to build it for them, and I said, I'm going to be living next door, and I don't think it's a good idea if I build your house. You know, just kind of if they have a complaint, I have to come over right away and fix it. I can't just, mute it.
Okay.
So,
Okay,
they're going to have a little bit more difficult time because I've looked at this survey as well, and their basement level is 861.4. So their variance request is going to be far greater than mine because currently I'm about 4 inches above the highest water mark. They're a half a foot below. So their challenge is going to be not only moving the first floor, which they'll be able to do because they can work with 35-foot ridge line. However, how do you can dissipate all that water?
Sure. So I just wanted to be clear here, though. The thinking is that you are matching the character here, regardless of what this house is showing, because that's showing a big change in character. But the overall ambiance character of the neighborhood has
Correct.
been this sort of modified two-story structures with the peaked roofs.
Yeah, and that's why I took that picture. I mean, like I said, I could have done schematics, like, on the proposed plan, but I think sometimes the picture says 1,000 words,
Yeah.
and you can actually see, this one was built in '86. This one just got finished this year. And this lot was 115 wide, and I think their ridge line was at like 34. So if I took this and I drew a line across, it would far exceed my ridge line.
Okay.
Now,
Thanks.
Again, I should have brought that, but
No,
I think you've seen this enough.
that clears it up. Thank you.
Is there any other questions or?
No, I think we're good. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Great. So this is a public hearing. Is there anyone here who would like to speak on this project?
Good afternoon. My name is Jeff Perrell. I've lived at 5504 Halifax Lane. I've been an Edina resident for about 23 years now. Currently on Halifax Lane for 11 years. I think I bring a unique perspective. Not only am I a neighbor, he built my house. And I do make him come there and fix things if something breaks. So he will do that. So, and I would just attest to the character of the whole. He didn't show you other pictures, but as most of Edina has, a lot of it has changed, and I'm really encouraged by it and excited about the change because, he's also unique because here he is, the builder with one of the oldest, plumber house in a sense, like it needs repair and all that. And so, as a neighbor, we're looking forward to it and actually have him continue as a neighbor too. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? So, motion.
I move to close the public hearing.
Second?
Second.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Motion carries. So bringing it back to the Planning Commission, any other comments or? Commissioner Lee?
Well, I am just ecstatic to see one where it's clear that with an 8-foot 6-inch ceiling height in the basement that it's possible to build a new house with an 8-foot 6-inch ceiling height. We've had so many requests for 10-foot ceiling heights and saying that's the standard. I just want to say that it's great to see one come in and really not ask for any more than what they need. And so I think it's very justified and it does fit the site well. It seems to have made the case that it's, regardless of how it relates to the next house, there's probably going to be a pretty good match of the character, overall architectural character. So I could support this.
I move approval of the variance, subject to the conditions and findings outlined in the staff memo.
Great, is there a second?
Second.
Second, all in favor? Aye. Sorry. Okay, motion carries. Okay, so this is our last variance request for tonight for 5905 Tamarack Lane. Thanks.
Tonight, the applicant is requesting to increase the first floor elevation 4 feet higher than the current home's first floor elevation in order to construct a new home at 5905 Tamarack Lane. 5905 Tamarack Lane is approximately 12,000 square feet in area and is located on the east side of Tamarack Lane, on the west side of 9 Mile Creek, and is located in the floodplain. The subject property is surrounded by single-family homes, and Walnut Ridge Park is located directly to the north. City of Edina's engineering standards require that the basement elevation of a new home be 2 feet higher than the FEMA base flood elevation. The requirement for increased height in basement elevation impacts the ability for the project to conform to the maximum first floor height requirement of 1 foot. The existing home is a split entry home built in 1959 prior to the FEMA floodplain study, which was conducted in 1979. Like I said, with the previous variance, it's a city and watershed district goal to elevate and remove homes out of the flood hazard areas when the opportunity arises. The variance requested is to allow the first floor elevation of the new home to exceed the first floor elevation of the existing home by more than 1 foot. The current home at 5905 Tamarack Lane has a first floor elevation of 875.2. The established floodplain elevation is 866.7. So the minimum basement elevation must be 868.7. With that, the proposed first floor elevation of the house is at 879.2. The environmental engineer has reviewed the application and has submitted comments which were included in your staff report. The grading for the proposed work will closely match existing drainage paths. Drainage will be directed either to Tamarack Lane or in the rear of the property and into 9 Mile Creek. Staff believes that the proposal meets the criteria for a variance to allow the first floor elevation 4 feet higher than the existing home. The proposed use is permitted in the R1 zoning district, and it meets all other zoning requirements with the exception of that first floor elevation height. The lowest level of the dwelling unit is 2 feet above the 100-year FEMA flood elevation of 866, which removes the proposed dwelling unit out of the flood zone. The variance allows the new home to be elevated out of the flood zone and maintain all the required setback distances, and the proposed home design fits within the character of the neighborhood. Tonight, staff recommends approval of the variance as requested, subject to the findings and conditions listed in the staff report.
Thanks, Emily.
Any questions?
Any questions for Emily? Commissioner Lee?
Thank you, Emily. Does the city consider what is the proper range of additional height allowed? So in this case, you're approving it based on the request. This one asked for 4 feet, the other one asked for 2 feet. How do you make a determination as to what's the proper amount?
Well, it needs to be 2 feet higher than the base flood elevation, which this one is at the 2 foot mark. And then their proposal, the basement elevation or the basement ceiling height is 8 feet 9 inches.
It is 8 feet 9 inches?
Yep, right. It's shown on the front elevation of the home.
Okay, so I'm just doing the math here, but if you have the first floor elevation at 879.2, and you set the basement elevation of 868.7, I think that leaves 10 feet 7 inches between the first floor and the basement.
I believe the applicant is here tonight, but the 8 feet 9 inches is just the wall height.
The finished?
Yep, finished.
Okay, so they're allowing
elevation.
some space for the
Floor
joist?
trusses and joists.
Okay, all right, thank you. Oh, so just to clarify, do you have sort of a guideline that you look at where you would say, I think that's too high, or if they had said we want to raise it 6 feet because we'd like 2 more feet in the basement, does that ever come into play?
Well, this overall meets the height requirement for this lot, so they're not asking for any additional height for the overall height of the structure.
So as long as it doesn't exceed the overall height of the structure, you're kind of granting some leeway as to how they distribute it in there. Okay, all right, thank you.
This is a split level, so we're measuring the first floor height off the entry, off the front door? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So is the applicant here?
Yep, that works.
Hi, Scott Busen, Great Neighborhood Homes. I don't own the property, but I'm applying on behalf of the owner. I live at 4615 Wooddale Avenue in Edina. This one added detail on it. The old home was measured from the entry, but it wasn't the real first floor. He had to go up the stairs, so it was a split entry, which was more common to build in the 60s. I think back when they did the zoning, they realized that was something that might get snagged up in that calculating off of old first floor height. Any questions?
Any questions?
So you said it's a split level, but you still have to abide by where the front door is what you're saying?
Correct.
So even though that's the front door, in reality, it wasn't really living space. It wasn't like they walked in and that was their first floor
Right.
level. Their first floor was higher.
Correct.
So by you establishing your new door a little bit higher, you're actually bringing, in some ways, I guess maybe you might even be bringing the first floor level down a little bit from where it
I had to
used to
double
be.
check, but yeah, the logic of that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, it's not really the floor entry of the old home wasn't really the first floor.
Right. Okay, thanks.
And we tried to, one thing, if you look at this home, I think I wrote in the narrative, we tried to, there's no house to the north. And usually we put the garage to the north on a new home because that's the least amount of light that comes in. And it's also kind of typically people want their garages further apart. But I mentioned the homeowner, if we can put the garage on the north side or on the south side, I can kind of stagger the home's mass away from the home to the south and thus kind of have it flow better. And the homeowner, when I met with, we had the neighborhood meeting and I walked with, she liked that we had done, thought through that. So they don't get as much light, but it just fits in better. And luckily they kind of wanted more privacy on that side anyway, so it worked out for the owner as well.
Well, thank you.
Any more questions?
Commissioner
Yes.
Abbott?
Can you talk about the retaining wall? There's a fair amount of retaining wall here. What is it?
Yeah, so the design of the older home was sort of like, I guess you'd call like a tuck-under garage. And because of that, they take steps down to the garage from the house to get, because that's, today we try to not have as many stairs. And also the fact that we put the garage on the other side of the property, it's higher. So to get that driveway down, we're going to retain some of the property just to hold that driveway up.
Well, my concern is there's a fair amount of spaghetti on that site plan. You're moving a lot of dirt and you're going to be moving a lot of water. So what is the retaining wall? Where are you going to build it out of?
Material-wise?
Yes.
It'll be some type of either imagine like a stone material. It's an architectural. You're seeing it. Oftentimes they're on the side and you really don't see it. So it'll be some type of a stone, or there's a lot of new products that are cast stone that look good, that are a little more sustainable because they're not quarrying rock.
Well, my concern is that it be durable. You and your neighbors are really depending on that retaining wall,
right,
to do its job for the
Right.
next 50 years.
Right. Yeah, and the city will require engineering for any that
For
are
that
over
wall.
4 feet.
Okay.
And there's a inspection of those and how they properly build them and drain them. And so the city's, I know, pretty tough about retaining walls.
We're comfortable with that? Okay.
And we're trying, obviously we can keep them 3 feet or, below 4 feet. They're inherently more durable.
Indeed.
Just the gravity factor, so. Any more questions?
Looks like we're good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great. So this is also a public hearing for this variance. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Seeing none.
Move to close the public hearing?
Is there a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. So bringing it back to the Planning Commission, any other comments or?
I'll move approval of the variance, subject to the conditions and findings outlined in the staff memo.
Second?
Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Thank you. All right, so the next public hearing is for preliminary rezoning and preliminary development plan for 4500 France Avenue, 3905 and 3907 Sunnyside Road.
Okay, thank you, Chair, members of the Planning Commission. This project is located up in the 44th and France area. It is the southwest corner of Sunnyside and France. It's the existing vacant dry cleaner building and 2 single-family homes on Sunnyside Road. The property is currently zoned PCD 1, Planned Commercial District, for the dry cleaners, and then the single-family homes zoned R1, low density. Within the building height overlay district, the properties in purple, which would be the dry cleaner site, there's a 2-story and 24-foot height limit. The single-family homes are 2.5-story and 30 feet for the height limit. So actually, you could build a taller house on the single-family lot compared to the commercial area. The area, all of these lots are located within the study area of the 44th and France small area plan. And just to show you, while the zoning is 2 stories, the small area plan did contemplate heights up to 4 stories along France and somewhat along Sunnyside, as indicated on the map. So this is our public discretion in land use pyramid. So being that this is a rezoning request, the city does have discretion on this one to say yes or no. The area is up in the red. The city doesn't have much discretion. If you conform to all of the city standards, we're more or less obligated to approve those. So again, we're down in the green areas where the city does have discretion. Just to show you a couple of renderings of pictures of what's out there today. So over a year ago, the applicant wanted to move forward with a proposal on this site. It was at that time that we were just starting the small area plan. So he put his plans on hold and waited for that process to take place. Just a quick rendering of the five-story concept that they were thinking about at that time. Once the small area plan was completed, they did come forward with a sketch plan review that we went through this past April. And this is a rendering of what that plan looked like. Again, a 4-story mixed-use project. This is the view of the sketch plan on Sunnyside. So the applicant has made a number of revisions from the sketch plan. They've reduced the number of units from 52 to 45. They've provided some direct access from the residential units to that pocket park where those 2 single-family homes are located. They've activated a portion of Sunnyside with providing the lobby on that side. And then they've made a number of architectural feature changes. I'll let the applicant go through those as part of their presentation. So here's a look at the proposal before you this evening. It is a 45-unit project with 6,500 square feet of retail on the main level. They're contemplating the potential for a restaurant within that retail space. We've seen a lot of correspondence that have come through in regards to parking concerns for a restaurant. So they're providing 40 parking spaces for the retail use. That would conform to our city code for retail, that amount of retail space. If they were to propose a restaurant within that area, our parking requirement is 1 space for 3 seats plus the number of employees on a maximum shift. So they would need to comply with that parking standard for a restaurant. So what we're seeing here is code compliant just based on the retail. If they were to propose a restaurant, it would have to conform to those parking standards for a restaurant. So there would be 40 surface or at-grade enclosed parking stalls on the main level, and there would be 69 parking stalls underneath that main level, and that would provide enough parking for the 45 residential units. 2 units proposed here would be for affordable housing. They're the 2 units that are on the back side that face the park. And they're also would provide a buy-in for the additional 2 units that they need in order to conform to our affordable housing policy. So it's a $270,000 contribution, cash in lieu of, and then the 2 units within the structure itself. So this request requires the rezoning of those 2 single-family lots and the commercial site to planned unit development and a site plan review. So a review of the site plan, as I mentioned, this is the surface parking lot. It is enclosed. Access would be gained off Sunnyside Road and France Avenue. So that's just for the retail spaces. Access to the residential parking is along the south lot line, actually on the adjacent property, which the applicant does own, and into the underground parking that would be accessed here. So the only access off Sunnyside would just be for the retail uses. A parking or a traffic study was done by SPAC Consulting, and they've concluded that the project could be supported by the adjacent roadways. Mike Spack is here from SPAC to answer any questions that we may have. They did do a comparison of a 12,000 square foot Walgreens that would be allowed under the current zoning, and that type of use would generate more traffic than what's proposed here this evening. So again, I touched on the parking. It is code compliant based on the retail and would be code compliant for the residential portion as well. The proposed landscaping would conform to our landscaping requirements. It would actually be an improvement over the existing dry cleaner site around the perimeter and within that pocket park that's located here. So the building would be constructed of brick. The applicant does have a materials board, and again, they'll go through that in a little more detail. So here's that pocket park on the west side. The building itself would be 49 feet and 8 inches along France. As you see, as the project moves back along Sunnyside, it would be 30 feet at that west lot line. So that's the height that's contemplated in the small area plan, a 2-story and 30-foot tall building as it transitions to the residential neighborhood. The applicant has addressed the small area plan, the guiding principles, and the give to get. Just to touch on a few of the highlights, the site the proposal does clean up a contaminated site, would vastly improve the aesthetics on the corner. The above ground utility lines would all be buried. Would improve the pedestrian friendliness with those enhanced sidewalks all along the project. They would be adding to the public realm with that pocket park. The storefronts would open toward France, and then that buffer area, the park, provides a nice transition to the residential development, or the residential single-family homes to the west. The applicant is proposing affordable housing that would be consistent with our policy. All the parking would be underground and not visible, no surface parking lots. The applicant has also indicated that those 40 parking stalls, while they are code compliant, needed for their project, they would be willing to open them up for district parking. So if someone were going to a use across the street, potentially they could park there. Additionally, bike racks would be provided, public art would be proposed on the corner. So again, they have addressed those guiding principles and the give to get as well. In looking at the compliance table where we look at our underlying zoning, they are requesting some flexibility for setbacks and again height through the PUD and the floor area ratio. But the sidewalk width proposed, those are consistent with the small area plan. So a primary issue for consideration of the Planning Commission is the proposal reasonable to justify the PUD rezoning for this site? So in this case, staff believes that it is. They have addressed those development principles and the give to get guidelines. And I've listed those. I mentioned them earlier. I won't go through the complete list. Additionally, we believe that the PUD is justified in this case. Again, it creates a more pedestrian-friendly development. Project would bring vibrancy to the area. Building would be high-quality brick, architectural panel, and glass. The buildings that are proposed here would be the only buildings allowed to be built on the site. Again, that's through the PUD. The PUD also ensures that the affordable housing policy is met. The PUD would provide a more creative site design, again, consistent with the goals and policies of the comprehensive plan. Green space, landscaping, additional public realm would be provided. We would recommend that the sustainability coordinator's memo be met as any condition of approval, should this be approved. And as I mentioned, the enhancement of the public realm. So in this case, in addressing all those items of the small area plan, we believe that the height increase is justified. And again, the existing roadways could be supported based on the traffic study done by SPAC. So with that, staff is recommending approval subject to the findings and conditions in your staff report. And with that, I can stand for questions.
Thank you, Carrie. Are there questions for Carrie? Commissioner Lee?
So in the previous proposal, there was talk of grabbing onto that island. That's not in this scheme at all.
That's correct,
right?
yes.
Okay.
A good point, I failed to mention that, yeah. So that free right would still be there with this project.
Okay. And do you happen to know if that, did that mean that the building had to pull back to get that public space on the outside, or is it still essentially the same location, we just don't get as much outdoor?
It's essentially the same spot, we just
Okay.
don't get as much.
Okay. And then I'm trying to figure out, where does the first residential house appear on the Sunnyside side elevation? Is that what's shown on sheet A0.6? Is that the first residence?
Yeah, I don't have that specific sheet in front of me.
Okay. With the, if you can just get to the elevation, but I think that's it. And then across, across the street, the same thing. It's actually commercial for the entire length. Is that right? This matching directly across from this project. Even though they're small structures, they're
Across the
commercial.
street?
Yeah.
It is commercial,
Across
correct.
on the other side of Sunnyside.
Yep,
Okay. And the first residence is actually a little bit further down.
further west, correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
there's the convention grill, then there's a couple of little
Okay.
office buildings, and then residential starts further down.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Strauss.
Director Tate, is this a county road, France, this section of France?
It is.
I mean, has Hennepin County checked in on, I mean, these turning movements are, I didn't see any comments from Hennepin County.
Yep, they've submitted comments. Their concerns were the maintenance of those plantings, snow storage,
Okay.
and then to gather any easements for those sidewalks, if they were going to go, if the sidewalks were going to push over the property line. So all those things are covered in our engineering memo.
They were covered, okay.
Yeah,
good.
but I guess if you had specific turning movement questions, because that free right's staying the same. So
Okay.
trucks can still make that corner, and that was a concern if that was going to go away. So it's going to stay as it is today.
Okay, they just seem to be all over that 7200 France. The turns there, I just.
Oh, you're talking about the access from
Yeah,
France?
yeah.
They had no comments on access to France.
They were okay
In this
here.
location with the driveways, because I think they're going from 4 different driveway cuts down to 1.
Okay, which
Yep.
they like, so, okay.
Yes, it's an
Right.
improvement.
Thanks.
Yeah, and actually in terms of that pork chop, so what trucks are turning there that are coming from Sunnyside?
Some pretty large delivery trucks to provide materials to those businesses on the north side of Sunnyside Road. We've seen full-size semis come through there.
But is there another way of addressing that they don't have to have huge trucks there? I mean, it seems like, I mean, while that may be true, it seems like it's not really an appropriate reason to sacrifice pedestrian and bicycle safety. I mean, there must be other ways of dealing with that.
If the island would come out, you'd have to move the entire signal system and some storm water catch basins, so it'd be a pretty major
I mean,
move.
could they have other kinds of trucks deliver other than semis?
They
that really
could,
make
but I would
sense?
say there's also moving trucks. We see full-size semis moving trucks on Sunnyside Road when people move, so.
Well, okay, but they wouldn't need to make a right on France, right? I mean, they could, if they're getting to 100, they can make a left on France and a left on Excelsior and get over that way.
I don't know how you would require either a delivery truck to use a different size truck or movers to use a different size truck, because it's a public roadway. So I guess that'd be my question, is how do you require that of users or businesses?
Well, if you don't have a pork chop there, then they obviously can't make the right-hand turn.
They would just make it and take over all the lanes of traffic in France, so then it becomes a safety issue. You know, if they showed up there and there wasn't space, we've seen trucks just swing out in the traffic.
Okay, moving trucks, that would happen, how often? I mean, I guess they're one of the things in the small area plan was, one of the ways we got everybody to agree finally after 6 months was that considering that pedestrian bicycle safety is a huge issue on France Avenue. And I think throughout the entire comp plan process, all of France Avenue is a huge problem. And so I think there are a lot more pedestrians and cyclists that want to cross that street safely than the number of trucks that need to make a right-hand turn there. And I think we're sacrificing safety of a large number of people for a very small number of truck deliveries. And I think we could work that better. Yeah.
So you're thinking as a condition, should the Planning Commission and Council recommend approval, that we add that as a condition, that we try to work with the county to take the pork chop
Yeah,
out?
I think we need to press the county harder on that. So I really do, because, like I said, the whole thing with the small area plan, the only reason we kind of came to agreement at the end was that people realized that this is really a safety issue.
Can I ask one? Is it the crossing of France Avenue? That's the concern?
Well, it's kind of the whole area, right?
Okay.
So, I mean, people bicycle along Sunnyside and they cross France. People walk along France or bike. I'm actually starting to see cyclists on France now, which I never saw before. So I had dinner at 50th and France tonight, and I saw cyclists coming down France both ways. So, I mean, kind of everywhere I go in Edina, you see a lot more pedestrians and cyclists than you used to. And a lot of times they're riding on sidewalks because they don't feel safe on the street.
Yeah.
And I think we should address that.
Okay, are there other questions? Commissioner Nemiroff?
Thanks. On page 22 of your presentation, Carrie, you talk about the various gives and the give to get.
I didn't bring my
So the
staff
various
report either.
gets, I guess. Yeah, in the proposal. Yeah, it's in your slides. It's in the,
In the slides?
Slide 22. Yeah, there's 14. Yeah. And obviously, the underlying theory behind give to get is that by the city agreeing to provide approvals for things that wouldn't ordinarily be approved, there's significant value being provided to the developer, and the city is then getting significant value in return that it would not otherwise get but for the development. In many communities, this kind of idea is statutory. I mean, so it's not just kind of a policy, but they actually have ordinances about it. And what they do, they also assess these values. They get some way of estimating what can be estimated and appraising the items that are more subjective. And there's some items on here that are fairly standard. Are there estimates, at least for what the city's getting here? And I saw you looking over, that's why I looked over.
Yep, so we had a little bit of discussion. Thank you for the question in advance. These are really rough ballpark, so don't take it to the bank. But the bearing of the utility lines, 30, 40,000. The public there, the sidewalk we're thinking all those, the bearing of the utilities, the sidewalks, that could be 80 to 100,000. The biggest value here is the public park and the value of that property, where there's 2 single-family homes or 2 residential lots. That could push $500,000. Again, just a rough ballpark.
Thanks. I appreciate your doing that, obviously rough estimate. I would encourage the city to formalize a process to do that. I think that the better we can establish the values and the give to get, the more the citizenry of Edina will feel that there's upfront, transparent transactions being made. One other comment I guess I would give is that there's some items on here in the give to get that I would not consider give to get. I would, particularly for variances, I would consider those perhaps give to get a permit, but not necessarily to go above and get something like meeting the affordable housing policy. I think all developments of a certain size are expected to meet the affordable housing policy now, aren't they?
Only when a rezoning is requested.
Okay.
So I think that's
that it is a give to get.
That is a give to get, yep.
Okay. What about high quality architecture?
So this list is taken from the small area plan, and it does mention specifically in there that some of these are typical what we would require as part of a site plan, the sidewalk improvements, those kind of things. So yes, you're right that some of these would be required. If a project came in for just simply site plan review, we can require sidewalks.
All right. Well, thank you, Carrie. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Are there any down here? No? I just have a couple. So I know that they're providing bike racks, but it seems like they're all kind of internal. Are there any external bike racks?
Yeah, and that would be, that's a standard code requirement based on the square footage of the retail space. I believe it's one bike rack per 20 parking stalls, so they'd be required to provide some along the street.
So they're not all within that parking area. They will be external.
Right.
Okay. Do we know, or maybe I missed that, and if I apologize if I did, have they reduced the length of the 4 stories along Sunnyside? Or is that the same as what was in the, is that
I
a
believe
question
it's
for them?
generally the same.
Okay.
But it could be a question
I'll
from
ask
the
them.
developer's office.
Okay. Let's see. This might just be for the engineering too, or whoever. But so the site is going to have to be cleaned up. And so when does that happen? Like if they get approval, are they going for grants for that, and does that?
I don't know if they're going for grants. I think that's a question for the applicant.
Okay.
But they'll be required to do soil borings and test the soils there just because of the previous use and have to meet certain standards when they're done.
And those haven't been performed yet, like the phase 1, phase 2, or whatever.
They may have. I guess I'm not.
Question for the applicant.
Yeah.
Sorry. Let me see if I've got any for staff. Well, I guess I can ask them all with the things. Good, thanks. So a question to the Planning Commission before we bring up the applicant. Would you like to have the traffic consultant present first?
Yeah, I think that's important.
Yeah, so thanks. Do you mind doing that?
Evening, Madam Chair, Commissioners. Mike Spack with Spack Consulting in Minneapolis. And just the quick presentation, hopefully our report is self-explanatory, but this is a good project from a traffic engineer's perspective. Reducing down to one common driveway on France Avenue is a big improvement, both for vehicular traffic as well as the pedestrians and bicycles, reducing those conflict points. The level of service at all the intersections will be maintained at an acceptable level. And Carrie touched on it, that an allowable use of putting in a pharmacy on the corner would generate about twice as much traffic as the proposed development. So.
When this was an operating dry cleaning establishment, what sort of traffic was generated?
We did not run those numbers. So certainly less than a pharmacy would, certainly.
Just to follow up on that question, I had the same one. Would it be less or more than what's being proposed?
I believe it would be a little bit less than what is being proposed right now, but I don't know the square footage of what the dry cleaner was, so I would need that to be able to run the numbers.
Okay.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for your report. Could you give us a little background into how you actually come up with your predictions, your projections of traffic? You do certain kinds of studies. Could you walk us through how you do the studies, come up with these numbers, how you estimate, a mid-rise apartment building will generate this many trips, a restaurant will generate this many trips. Can you walk us through how you get there?
Yeah, we look at it a couple different ways. The Institute of Transportation Engineers has a big data set of land uses around the country and how much traffic, the traffic rates that will be generated by different types of uses, by square footages or students if it's a high school. But that is a pretty static document, so our firm collects a lot of local data. We're the second biggest contributor to the last round of the trip generation manual update. So we're continually collecting local data, so we have a current pulse on the trip generation rates. So then we look at apartment buildings in the Twin Cities and even in kind of first ring suburbs, more urban environments. We look at comparable uses, measure the traffic coming in and out of those existing buildings, and then those are the rates we base our studies on because we feel that's a more accurate way of forecasting the traffic.
You sit and have somebody just sit and watch them in operation, or are you filming them?
That's the way I was hazed as a young engineer. But now we use video camera technology on different driveways of different land uses, so we can even collect weeks worth of videotape data, and then we can watch that on fast forward speed and tally the traffic coming in and out. And we're working on artificial intelligence to do that, but haven't quite cracked that yet.
And so if somebody says, I'm going to build a 4,000 square foot restaurant, you have all this video that you've looked at, and you can say, well, based on the types of similar things we've looked at, on average, we see this many daily trips and this many PM and AM rush hour trips at that kind of facility.
Correct.
Thank you. So I had a couple other questions. On page 7 and 8, you talk about corridor vehicular analysis, corridor road car capacity. You gave, on page 7, you gave 3 different bullets of 2 different types of lanes, 2 different types of roads, and how many trips per day are considered congested. And you gave 2-lane, 4-lane, and 6-lane. You consider this road 2-lane or 4-lane?
We would consider this 2-lane with turn lanes.
Okay.
So it's kind of in this gray area, and those are very rough back of the envelope numbers. That's the starting point for our analysis, because the whole corridor can work well, but have pinch points along it that are not working well. So then we kind of take the big macro level of the corridors, but then we also go down to the individual intersections around the site to make sure there aren't any pinch points along the corridor at a micro level.
Okay. You, for 2 lanes, you have a wide range in the number of vehicles at which congested happens, between 8,900 and 18,300. And then on page 8, you have a chart of this road, I believe. Yes, the various roads there, where you're showing various, existing, no further building, and then further building over the next few years. And the highest you're showing is, it looks like maybe 0.7 something in terms of this road being congested. Is that based on the 8,900 or the 18,300? Do you know?
I believe that's on the higher number,
Okay.
I believe.
All right, you're showing it, yeah, the highest is like 75% of congestion. Okay.
But I would have to go back to the document to pull those numbers, which I can do in a little bit if you'd like me. But it'd take me a couple minutes to verify that.
Oh, well, that might be interesting. I think I only had one other thing, and that's on your conclusions on page 18 and recommendations. And this is probably as much a question for the applicant, I suppose. Your second to last bullet says all loading on site should be encouraged to occur outside of peak hours, other than 7 to 9 and 4 to 6. Is that just good hygiene, or is there a deeper reason for that recommendation?
No, that's definitely good hygiene. Of when we can, we'd like the deliveries to happen so they don't happen at the same time as the rush hour.
Okay, so that'd probably be something, when the applicant speaks, maybe that's something they can talk to. But thank you then, Mike. Thank you for your report and your discussion.
Before you,
Yeah, go for it.
the bullet point on 6 above, the channelized right turn from eastbound Sunnyside, which we talked about up here. Can you help us, from your perspective, understand that and understand what that negotiation with the county, what its possibility might look like?
Yeah, that's a trade-off, and Commissioner Miranda kind of touched on it, that if we can get rid of that channelized right turn, it definitely has a benefit for the pedestrians and bicyclists. But it's at a trade-off of very large semi-trucks not being able to make the turn. Without the channelized right turn, buses, U-Hauls, trash trucks, FedEx trucks, they would all be able to make the turn. But we're talking the over-the-highway full 50-foot semi-trailers, even a smaller semi-trailer with a 33-foot box, termed a WB40 in the jargon, that would be able to make the turn. That's the largest vehicle that could. So it is a negotiation with the engineering staff and the county, and it's weighing those trade-offs. And how often do we think those full-size trucks are making deliveries? And yeah, it's difficult. It's a public street, so it's impossible to tell them they can't go there unless we put on weight restrictions. And then how do you police those? And I mean, so it's really a sticky kind of tough can of worms. So it definitely just comes down to negotiation. But it's very nice that the county is very appreciative of removing all of the driveways on France Avenue. So the county is definitely seeing a benefit for this development happening by eliminating 3 of those driveways and consolidating furthest south they can with the other parcel. So it's kind of the give to get situation.
So you're saying now would be the time to negotiate that, not later?
If the city wanted to go that path, it's probably the strongest position.
I would just add one thing with the county, conversations with the county. If that moved, they would probably require a right turn lane. So now we're actually making it a longer crossing for pedestrians. You're gaining that space in front of the building, but this crossing is longer. So again, it's all those trade-offs of what's the best. And the county may require that a bigger truck could make that corner. We didn't actually talk about what size truck they're going to require to make that turn on the France, because if they can't make it, it's going to interrupt their own operations on France. So they might just require it. And we might need more space from that in front of the building to design, where we thought it was going to be pedestrian. Now it's a turn lane, and curb lines are actually pushed into what's maybe proposed, but we just don't know yet. They're all trade-offs.
Commissioner Ruby.
So it looks like one of the options is to move that signal so that you lose kind of the island, but you move the signal and have a wider area attached to what's now the building. But you have to pay to move the signal. So if we had the developer move the signal as one of the conditions of building the building, do you have a sense of how much that costs?
To move, do you have up-to-date numbers? My estimate would be kind of in the $50,000 to $75,000 range to move one quadrant of a signal.
Yeah, but typical intersection is anywhere from $300,000 to $400,000. So depending on the impacts, you could be in that range or a little higher. And then you have to look at how much curb, that's a weird angle. So I think
Yeah.
this one's going to be on the more expensive just because of all the additional curb, potentially a turn lane and those factors
Yeah.
to consider.
Because it looks like that's an option according to Hennepin County, where you'd have more space on the corner, the attached corner, but you get rid of that little island. But in order to do that, you have to move the signal.
When you have to make sure the trucks that they want designed to make the corner can make the corner
Yeah,
and not interrupt their operations on France.
yeah. Thank you.
Great, I just have a couple questions. So, in your report, under your results on page, I think it's like I, in the executive summary, you're talking about that the site may have more restaurant/retail parking demand than capacity on Saturday evening, in which case there's going to be overflow parking, which will need to be handled on the street. Can you address that? So it sounds like it's not just necessarily if it's a restaurant, but you're also concerned with retail?
We're less concerned with retail. It's the restaurant driving the Saturday night parking, and it very much, we're a little bit, these are forecasts. It very much depends what kind of retail. Are they open in the evening on Saturdays at all? There are some types of retail that close at 6 p.m. So there's a wide range of what could happen. We're forecasting kind of that most conservative of if it is a busier retail combined with a busier restaurant that could go in there. We're forecasting that there could be up to 20, 25 vehicles that would kind of be circulating, looking for on-street parking, which is about a block face worth of cars parked, is what that would equate to.
Okay. So I guess I'm just trying to figure out how we address that concern. If we do that now, or is that something that we have to, as the use comes in, is that something, Carrie, that we would have them review?
So if the restaurant that they want to put in there exceeds that 40 parking stalls, they would need a variance, and it would come before the planning commission.
So that would, but it sounds like
we just don't know the size of the restaurant.
Right, but even with retail, it has that potential too.
Right.
Okay. Then the other one is the queuing conflict. I know you brought that up. And can you address that? And I know because Hennepin County also brought that up, there was concern. I think you guys both had queuing conflicts, but a little bit different.
So I believe what we flagged in the report is that driveway on France Avenue, and the parcel to the south operates more as a one-way. So that is a little bit unorthodox, as there'd be multiple ways people are coming in and out. We're expecting it to be a low-traffic driveway, so that conflict should not happen very often, and the speeds on France Avenue through there are on the lower side because of the nature of the urban environment. So we feel comfortable, given the very urban nature of France Avenue and the driveway and clear sight distance, that we wanted to make you aware of it, but we don't see it as a significant issue.
Following up on Hennepin County's comment, I don't know if you saw that, but their concern was the access into the parking is, really close to France, and that there'd be some queuing issues with that. So you didn't look at that? That wasn't a concern with your?
I know we looked at it subjectively. We did not run a capacity analysis, but I don't see that as a concern.
Okay. Great. I'm just throwing it back at you. Did you guys look at that? Did you look at that?
I'd agree with Mike. We're not concerned with that.
Okay.
That movement. The county just raised it as a potential concern.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Go for it.
Kind of a two-part question, because Mr. Spack may not be the person to answer it, but first part is, did you look at speeds of traffic on Sunnyside? And the second part is, even if you did or you didn't, kind of a question for the city staff about do you get reports or complaints about the speed of traffic on Sunnyside?
So we reconstructed the street on Sunnyside in 2016. So we did analysis of speed and volumes before, and that neighborhood wanted us to address some of those things. So we put in the curb cuts or the bump outs at Grimes and Curve Avenue, and then we studied the traffic afterwards. And we did see a reduction in the volume, and the speed stayed pretty consistent at, I think it was 28 to 30 miles an hour, but I have to look up those numbers. So we did see a drop in the volume. We think they went over to 44th Street, but we haven't done it again. We did it in 2017, we didn't do it in 18.
Are the volume of complaints you're receiving or concerns, have they gone down since you're?
We haven't got any traffic safety requests since the reconstruction of that road, of Sunnyside Road.
Thanks.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I think the city did a great job on Sunnyside when they, like you said, added the bump outs and everything. Was one of my things I wonder about is the speed limit signs actually encouraging people to go faster than they would normally go? If you look at that street, you don't look like you would go 30 miles an hour. But you see a sign that says, hey, 30 miles an hour. So it's like, I can go that fast. I mean, did the neighborhood demand that they have speed limit signs, or what was the thought behind? Because most streets around there don't have speed limit signs, right?
I think you're probably coming off France, so you need to signify because the speed limit on France changes, so you want to let people know when they come in that is 30. Typically, you drive at what's comfortable, and that's why we tried to narrow that down. Trees on the side gives you a narrower feel, so even though the sign says 30, it might not feel comfortable to go 30.
Right, I'm wondering why, the theory is that if a street is designed for 40 miles an hour and you put a 30 mile an hour sign on it, people aren't going to go 30 miles an hour. But this is the opposite, where it's actually designed, I think, for probably like 25 miles an hour to drive safely down there, especially if a car is coming the opposite direction. Cars do go a lot, I live in that neighborhood, so cars go a lot slower when there's a car coming in the opposite direction or if there's a cyclist or something. But if there's just a car by itself, I think they tend to go faster than they might if there were no speed limit signs there. Just a thought.
Great. Well, thank you. So, applicant.
Good evening, Madam Chair and Commission members. My name is Ted Carlson. I live at 5516 Knoll Drive in Edina. And as Gretchen is preparing some slides for you tonight, we're excited to be here after 14 plus months of planning. And the overarching thing that I want you to take away from tonight is we think that this time has allowed us to develop a plan that's much improved and much better. And that started with the sketch plan submission last July. Really got ratified with the small area plan in April 2018, where we submitted our sketch plan immediately thereafter. And since then, we've taken time to try to get this project adjusted and right, and we're here before you today. So we paid a lot of attention to the small area plan from start to finish, was involved in most of the meetings, and I've also reviewed the recent draft Edina Comprehensive Housing Plan, so that we're trying to be aware and at the forefront of changes in Edina. So with that, what we've learned is that, going through this process has brought us to a lot better product today. We've had a community that's engaged and participated in the process. I personally have over 60 individual or small group meetings with neighborhood and area residents. And I believe that you should have received support from both the adjacent homeowners to the west and to the south. On a more technical basis, we've reduced the height from 62 feet to 48 feet. We've decreased the units from 64 units to 45 units, and the building square footage has reduced by over 26%. The Give to Get's had a lot of conversation today, and we're certainly not ignoring that subject. Commissioner Olson, you'd specifically asked about what type of contamination is present. We've done phase 1 and phase 2 studies. The current site owner had also performed a phase 2 before us, so literally speaking, the site is somewhat Swiss cheese with holes. There's contamination in the form of asbestos in the building, vapors in the soil, and petroleum in the soil. So this development would cure all of those ills, and would be in a condition where we have two things that we need. Number one is insurability, and number two is future saleability. So for us to secure a significant financing package for a project of this size, or frankly for any size on this site, we need to provide it in clean environmental condition. So what we would talk is, what do we remove and what do we give, or what do we add? And so we're removing a blighted building. We would remove the overhead power lines. We've got significantly different estimates on costs to remove power lines by a factor of 10x over what's been discussed earlier today. And what's been talked about is the entrance on and off of France. We're removing 3 curb cuts and reusing an existing curb cut because we are the adjacent property owner to the south. So we think that's a pretty big deal. And I think it's a nice way that this project tees up with our property to the south. We're adding wider sidewalks, pedestrian bike friendly, public art and park, and public parking. We think it's a great spot. If you get an ice cream cone or a piece of pizza, you can walk down to the park. You can use a grill in that park. We're providing affordable units for ADA accessibility and housing. Nino and I are both very active with 2 very sizable nonprofits that help disabled adults throughout the Twin Cities. Nino is my development partner. And we provide a bunch of new housing that appeals not only to empty nesters, which is what provided our original vision for this project, for people that want to remain in the neighborhood but don't want to care for a single family home. I think that's a big deal. And then we always want to create projects that are long lasting and focus on the highest and best use. So we believe that this project, in conformance with the small area plan, is a good example of highest and best use. So when we look at a development project, we always start with why. And our why and our vision on this project was, we create and build projects for the long term. We want this to be an example of future projects, not only in this neighborhood, but elsewhere throughout the city, with a sizable buffer with the houses adjacent to the west. As I said, we want to focus on the highest and best use. We want to fit the neighborhood, and I think this shot is the best example that we have today, before Gretchen and her team show you some more of how the project, we believe, fits within the neighborhood. A couple other things I'd like to address that were brought up earlier in the comments was parking. Since day one, as an operator of other commercial buildings within the city of Edina and elsewhere, we need to make sure that the patrons have a great experience when they come to our projects. And so, as a resident who's frequently in the 50th and France area and 44th and France area, we don't not want another red cow. And I've heard that over and over again from area residents. I just want to give you 2 statistics on red cow. It's about 4,700 square feet in size with 10 parking stalls. You know, our potential as possibly proposed restaurant is 3,500 square feet with 40 on-site and 7 on-street stalls. So we'd be willing to do some sort of size restriction on restaurant. We've heard a lot from the neighborhood and the community that a lot of the reason people choose Edina is the walkability of amenities such as a restaurant. So in the comparison to Red Cow, I think it's apples and oranges. We almost have almost 5 times more parking for a restaurant that's, as planned today, 20% less in size. Regarding density, we've heard a lot about, density and traffic, and I think, Mike hit the nail on the head, but we're 45 units per acre here. Comparable projects within 5 blocks of this site are at an average of 72 units per acre. So we're 38% less dense than comparable projects. I think that needs to be mentioned, and I think that's a big deal. Lastly, someone had asked about, have we applied for grants? And the resounding answer is yes. Our intent is to seek every opportunity for public contribution to this site because of the scope and magnitude of what we're doing within some pretty significant restrictions. So we've applied for TVRA and DEED grants, and we're in for funding in conjunction with the city staff, and we're waiting to hear those. I believe those grants are awarded in November. Lastly, we talked about loading and unloading. We can certainly control when potential residents load and unload on the site, and we would do our absolute best to control when retailers load and unload on the site. And as someone pointed out, there's commercial loading up and down the street, well past ours on the north side of Sunnyside. So with that, I really appreciate the participation of the neighborhood and you here, and Gretchen can take over on some of the more architectural details that we've changed since our sketch plan submission in April. Oh, and Bert too.
Good evening, Commissioners. Good to see you again. I'm Gretchen Camp from ESG.
And I'm Bert Coffin from ESG.
500 South Washington Avenue in Minneapolis. So since we last saw your group in March, there's a number of design changes, and Bert and I are going to run through those with you, and then obviously any questions that you have. Just to start with the site design, Damon Farber Associates is engaged in the project and heavily involved in the design. And so since the last time we met with you, we've incorporated and programmed and designed an amenity along Sunnyside, and it's programmed as a pocket park. There will be walk-up units that actually front the pocket park, and it's designed as a public space amenity to the neighborhood. And I'm going to go through a number of images that'll give you some more detail on this park. So this is an image of the Sunnyside sidewalk here, Sunnyside Road here. You can kind of see the entrance. You can see the walk-up units fronting the park. We envision a kind of, I'll call it a grand stair in the center here with bench height seating, planters on each side, permanent bench seating throughout, and then I'll show you in plan where there's a number of like a community table type space. We'll have accessible ramps that get up to this space as well. As you recall from that section earlier that Carrie showed, Sunnyside rises, so you have a significant grade change, and so this kind of actually helps make up that grade change within the pocket park. Here's a view if you actually were looking further north and you're actually walking on the sidewalk along Sunnyside. Again, planters kind of flanking the entrance to the park, envisioning a sculpture piece as a focal point, permanent bench seating. There's a large, I'll call it a great lawn where you could do bocce or have a picnic. Kids could play. I'll show you a floor plan that's more programmatic. This is in your packet. Again, the sidewalk along Sunnyside here. Accessible ramp that gets you up to that level. I would say it's about 4 to 5 steps up here. These are the walk-ups. Right now, this plan is showing that enclosed parking, but in the images I'll show you, you can see where this stair goes up to the walk-up units. There's 3 units that front this park. This is what I was talking about with a gathering table, a community table where you could have dinner. There's a rock mulch area, maybe for even pets, I think, could go here. The great lawn is in the white space here. Permanent bench seating is planned to be here, and then as I pointed out in that view, a sculpture piece.
And it's very highly... It's turned on?
Yeah, you got it.
It's very highly landscaped as well, and I don't know if we have the landscape plan here, but there will be full trees kind of between the neighboring property there, the home to the west, and as well as a lot of foundation plantings along the side of the building. So landscaping this is very, very important to this little park.
And then in addition to the screening of the landscape, there will also be a fence that shows up in your plan as well. So this is a view of that privacy fence between this park and the neighboring single-family home. To kind of keep going around the site with further updates on the landscape plan, we have located a dog amenity area here. As you recall, there's probably the curb cut locations that we've been talking about. One is about here. There's another existing curb cut here, and another about here. So those 3 curb cuts go away, and we consolidate with, as Ted mentioned, the property to the south is owned by the same ownership. So the resulting curb cut is here, but as you come over here, this actually drops down to the lower level parking. So that dog park is kind of on that slope headed down. Throughout the site, there's bench seating, decorative lighting. I'll show you some close-up views of the raised planters within the streetscape. And then associated with that is scored concrete, specialty concrete. The bike racks that you were asking about, Chair Olson, we do have a spot here for bike racks, and I also envision bike racks in the boulevard near the residential lobby. Yeah, go ahead.
I think, the public realm part of this is very, very important to us, as well as the architecture, which we'll get to. But one of the things that we did as a strategy is we held the building back 9 feet from the property line along France and about as much on Sunnyside. So we're creating basically 15 feet now of pedestrian experience along France, which we think is a great improvement to what is there. Basically adding these planters with full trees on Sunnyside as well as on France. We just think that there's going to be little planters with raised curbs there, and there'll be a space on Sunnyside between the curb and where cars may be parked on Sunnyside. We're even proposing small little decorative ornamental fences in these planters so that, dogs aren't just running willy-nilly in them, but so we can actually grow some perennials in them. But the landscaping is super important. We wanted a wide pedestrian experience there so that it's really comfortable, and that when you're walking along, as you can kind of see in this image, that there feels like there's a little bit of buffer between you, the pedestrian walking, and the cars going past on France Avenue, basically. And then this kind of gets a little bit into the architecture. I don't know, is that where we're going next?
I just wanted to show a close-up view as we're talking about the site amenities. Again, incorporating bench seating, as Bert said, just encasing and enclosing these planters to give them some more survival for either salt or pets. And then, as Bert said, along Sunnyside, we have 17.5 feet of boulevard sidewalk, and then on France we have 15.5 feet. I think today on France it ranges between 5 and 6 feet. There's not a boulevard on France, and then over on Sunnyside it's about 8 or 9 feet. In terms of just some other comments on the floor plan, last time we were with you, the lobby to the housing was over here. So that has since moved to Sunnyside, bringing that active use to Sunnyside here. And we'll kind of show you the updates on the elevations, how that changed Sunnyside. So you'll have the glazing, so again, either retail or restaurant on the corner, outdoor seating, another opportunity for an art piece, and then that glazing really just continues down, and the lobby main entrance is here, and then there'll be seating and waiting areas in the lobby, and that goes all the way to here until the parking entrance further down Sunnyside. Again, we're kind of making our way up Sunnyside, I guess I'll call it. So there's the parking entrance. This is a change from last time where we have a more decorative screening into the parking. So you have some transparency. I think there was comments at this commission as well as the city council about lack of transparency. As you recall, this is our former elevation that we had at the time of sketch plan, where we didn't have any transparency between pedestrians on the street and the, I guess, again, pedestrians and cars in the ramp, just a safety issue.
It was a little bit, and there was a lot of discussion, as you recall, about this, and we are proposing really a decorative screen from a safety point of view. Pedestrians along the street can see cars coming and going. Pedestrians in the garage can kind of see better.
And they can be seen.
And they can be seen from the street. So it's a little bit, we're going to have to design the lighting really well so there's no spillover, but we think we can do that. We just want to make it safe as possible along there.
So then in addition to the ground floor changes, we also have landscaping in front of that. The row house character steps down, so it's basically a two-story walk-up unit as you get toward
and this
single
expression,
family.
as you recall, also changed quite a bit from what you saw last time. And this was what it was last time. It felt like it really didn't have a top to it. And what we decided here is, can we look at something that is a little more bay-like, that feels a little more pedestrian, more townhome-like in scale, kind of, and more neutral in color as well, because we realize this is really the interface between the homes that are to the west, many of which are, white painted clapboard. There are a variety of homes, but we thought something a little more neutral and clean would look better. And then you step up to the four-story, just to the left of this. But the main expression of the building, what we heard comments from you as well from council members that we needed to refine the building. This was what it was last time, and especially that here at the end where the retail was at the corner just didn't feel interesting enough. And so as we were thinking about this project, we want this to be a timeless project. It has, traditional elements to it. It's using traditional materials, but it's not going overboard. We thought about adding this kind of bay, very lightweight metal and glass bay expression on the end of the building, and we think that really kind of brings some some architectural interest to the end of the building. And those are going to be living rooms for the units. There's 2 each on each floor there. So those are going to be amazing rooms, and it becomes a little bit of like a lantern when it's lit up, especially at night. We think that could glow and look really nice on the street when you're driving past on France Avenue. We also enlarged the windows on the building, so they're all a little bit larger. The balconies have become larger. We wanted the balconies to be more like outdoor living rooms in a sense, so that the residents that live here could bring a table and 4 or 6 people could sit around a table outside and have a dinner party, or have a chaise and a table. Those are the key changes, and the glazing along the first floor obviously has remained the same. We wanted just a lot of transparency along the retail glazing there on the street level.
I think in your packets, you have a memo here from the Sustainability Department and Tara Brown. We've had correspondence with her office, and this is just kind of a start because we'll be working with them throughout the project for requirements for sustainable design. So I'm just going to start here, and as I said, this is just we've just begun the process. So we will be enrolling in the Energy Design Assistance Program with Excel, also benchmarking for how we're doing with Sustainable Building 2030 Challenge. So that will be showing how our building complies with the 2030 requirements. And any strategies that are identified that are under a 15-year payback, they will be incorporated into the project. Again, this will be, as you see in the memo, a requirement of the project. The project will be solar ready, so structural components on the roof, conduits to mechanical room sizing appropriately, so the project will be ready for solar. We are contemplating a heat pump or a split furnace DX system for the residential units, having a much more increased energy savings over, I think, typically what your group is used to seeing with a Magic Pack system in residential. 10% of the parking stalls will have electric vehicle charging infrastructure. All of the appliances in the residence and in the businesses will be Energy Star, and then the commercial kitchen, should there be one for restaurant, will have organics recycling. Again, this is just kind of our starting point, and we're really looking forward to working with Tara and her team to make this come to fruition. So we are available for any kind of questions, but those are the major highlights of the changes since March.
Thank you. Opening up for questions for the applicant. Commissioner Thorson.
What is the approximate square footage of the grass area in the pocket park?
Great question. I'm going to space it off of, here we go. Just a second. That says 17 by, I have it here. No, I have it here. I have it here. Sorry.
I think Mike can look it up for us.
Okay, Michael, we'll get you the length. I thought. Do you have it? Yes, thank you, Mike. This is our civil engineer.
Hi, I'm Mike Kettler with Civil Engineer for Sunday Engineering. My office is in Bloomington. I don't have the complete answer. I know the total green space on the site is approximately 4,830 square feet. That includes the pocket park and then some of the green space that are the planting curb islands along the boulevards. The majority of that would be the park, the 4,830, majority of that being in the park for green space.
In your packet in the landscape plan, you'll be able to read that number, and I think it's going to be like 40. I think it's 17 by 40 is the green lawn, but 110, maybe L110, something like that, would be this, or maybe L. Other questions?
I'm going to go Commissioner Berube.
So as you recall, one of the big issues and concerns that were expressed last time you were here is the traffic. And we talked a little bit about the island, and
right.
There might be some constraints given what Hennepin County wants. But the other issue was the curb cut on Sunnyside and people exiting that parking ramp. So can you speak to this a little bit? It looks like For the underground parking ramp, they'll have to enter on France, is that correct?
Correct.
But it's only the surface that you can exit on Sunnyside.
Correct. So residential entrance, which is the 69 stalls, is in and out onto France through this ramp that goes down, and then just the 40 stalls. And you can also access them from France. So in theory, half of the exiting and entering for the 40 stalls is on Sunnyside.
Okay, because one of the big concerns is people turning left there and then coming, increasing the traffic going through the neighborhoods.
Right.
Was there any thought to anything more you could do there?
I think we're open to a variety of solutions. One solution I have seen is a strategically placed island where you can still take a left. Let's just say you're coming from here. You can still take a left into here. But if you're coming out, it would be about right here where you wouldn't be able to take a left out. That's something we've talked about. Again, it might only be about 20 cars, and maybe Mike wants to comment on that. But that's an option.
And you've talked about it internally or also with city staff?
I think we have talked about it mostly internally, and I want to say I've brought it up the idea to staff. Do you have any thoughts on that,
And
Mr.
is that
Millionaire?
transportation or is that engineering that would decide that?
That'd be me.
Oh. So
Yeah,
what do you think?
Well, I'd go back to specs, traffic study, and I'd have a conversation to see if it's really warranted for how many cars we think are coming out of there and whether it's really going to impact the amount of traffic on Sunnyside Road and compare it to what the use was there before and what could be there.
In your opinion, would it be reasonable to say that if it turned out that there were a lot of left-hand turns out of that parking lot, that, and the neighbors thought it was warranted, that at that point you could do something?
We could come back. It just comes to be the funding source. How do we fund it at that point? And I would, if there is cars coming out, we're hoping if it's truly a restaurant, we're hoping the neighbors are using it more so. So are we penalizing the people that actually live in the neighborhood? And if there's only 20 or 40 cars coming out of there, are half of those actually residents west of this site? And that would be a deterrent to our own residents using this potential project area.
And then maybe just to touch on your comment about the right turn. As you all recall, we did show that incorporated in the project, and that would be great. We were getting indication from the county that was not something they wanted to support, so we just felt it was best to get this approved because it's a reduction in the outdoor space. So if anything, we're really happy to have more conversations with the county, and it would be great if something could happen. Then that area only gets larger. So I feel like this is the reduced size to be approved, and then it gets. I think one thing that maybe is interesting is that island, I'll call it, actually helps pedestrians, because if you actually got rid of it, their crossing would be longer.
It's a little bit of a refuge for, first you take one crossing to the island.
And you can stop there.
We had kind of heard that's why it had been put in place, so.
So we're a little bit torn on it. If you're, I mean, we like the idea of more space outside, but it actually does help somebody, especially an older person, to be able to get there. Okay, then they can look one more time, and then they can cross again.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is a great page to be on. I had two different questions that relate to questions you already received. In the sketch plan review, we actually talked about at one time eliminating the entrance on Sunnyside and just having people enter on France. Did you give consideration, and if you did, why did you decide not to continue with the two entrances?
Yes, we did look at that. I think for the flow of the project, having one curb cut for absolutely everything, and given the fact that, the county did comment on it, and we think it functions okay, the flow of being able, basically when you cut this off, you kind of have to turn around in the
other thing
space.
that as well as if you have retail tenants or parkers, right, people that are using the retail, they want to go left on France Avenue. If they only come out on the south and they're trying to cross traffic and turn north, that could be kind of a pinch point in the project with other vehicles coming up from the basement, for instance. So being able to go out on Sunnyside, turn right, and go to the semaphore, to the traffic light, and then turn left is very helpful.
that makes sense. Then following up on the pocket park comments, I'm concerned about the redesign of the pocket park, making it psychologically a much more private space. And
You think it looks like a private space?
Psychologically a private space with all the landscaping and the planters near the entrance. You know, when I think about parks, see, I think that's a beautiful park. My guess is that's the kind of thing that designers and developers really like, but that aren't popular with users, lay people. I mean, I'm in the United States, I struggle to think of popular or used parks that have narrow entrances and trees all around them. It's when people go to parks, they like to see people, they like to be seen for safety purposes and for fun. And I think the more landscaping you provide, I think it becomes a more beautiful place, but a less used space. So I'm wondering what your thoughts were and why you wanted to
I would say when I go to a
specific
park,
changes.
I definitely want to be in a space that's heavily landscaped and has trees. I definitely don't like that barren, just personal feeling of like where I want to sit and where I want to be. I want to be in shade typically. I want to be under a tree. But that's
You
my
know,
personal.
Commissioner, I think it's an interesting comment, and I don't disagree with you at all, and we would be willing, we do like the heavy landscaping, and we feel that's a public benefit. Is there ability to massage what we have? Absolutely. We could, you know, reduce the size of the planters, for instance, along Sunnyside there and create a wider, you know, staircase for that matter, just to make it feel more welcoming. So I think that we would be very open to looking at that.
Yeah, I'd appreciate it. I saw a privately developed, open to the public pocket park in San Francisco near downtown a few months ago, and it was empty. It was beautiful, but it was empty. You had to go up some stairs, and there were hedges all around, and it just looked like the main open psychological space was to the building next to it. And yeah, beautiful but empty is probably not the answer.
We want it to be used, absolutely. We have a topography issue there that we have to address, hence the 3 or 4 steps, but we're very open to widening that throat and making it more welcoming. So.
Yeah, you understand my psychological, I mean,
Yeah.
it is
Absolutely.
open. There's no gate.
Yeah.
Right. No gates.
Yeah, but it still feels psychologically closed to a lot of people. So if you could look, I would appreciate that. Those are my 2 questions about that one page.
Thank you.
Oh, stick to the pocket park. I'll start there. So I actually like the design of the pocket park. I think from what I've read, you know, you want to have, you know, the permanent bench seating I think is really nice and it faces each other so people can have conversations or choose not to if they decide not to. But the ability is there. Actually, none of those pictures show the third bench,
Yeah,
which would
right.
be
I was
along
just
the
seeing
other
that.
side. Yeah, okay. I was wondering
Or
if
the
that was
community
elevated.
table. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, right. Okay. So I think that part of it is well done. When you look at the part when you look at it head on, it's either the previous or the next picture. I'm not in a wheelchair myself, but looking at that wheelchair ramp,
Yeah,
it looks
that'll
like you're going to
help
hurt
if
your
you
fingers.
narrow
or
the
something.
planters.
Yeah, we have a rendering problem there,
Okay.
Commissioner, so you're very astute.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That looks really painful.
It looks impossible to navigate.
And then, so you said there's a dog run on the other side of the building. Is that for pet relief too, or?
I think
or-
it's actually specifically, I'm mostly for pet relief.
Oh, okay,
Yep.
okay. Because I think that otherwise that park area,
Could
that
be the
grass
run
area would
area.
be, nobody would picnic there because they would find presents.
Yeah.
So, and then now the pocket park, this seems to be a more recurring thing in Edina and other cities where, because we were talking about having Woolnerfs and pocket parks and stuff, but this is still owned by the property owner, right?
Correct,
So this is
and
not
maintained.
Right, okay. Yeah, so the maintained part's good.
Yes, we
Right.
think so.
So people couldn't have like a public protest here or something or whatever, right?
Okay, so it's possible that it could be dedicated and then maintained by the
Oh, really?
private owner.
Okay.
And then you really get into, you could program it. I think I live right by a park called Gateway Park, and it's pretty dead all the time. And it's open, it's wide open, and it's got a fountain and everything, it's dead. Programming is huge. Having a farmer's market up in there, easy to do.
Right.
You know, having, well, whatever, kids' day, the programming, and I live downtown, and programming is key to parks. Otherwise, they're pretty dead.
Right. Okay, great. Okay, so then, let's see what else. First of all, thank you for removing a dry cleaning factory from our neighborhood.
We have a lot of before and afters.
I've been here 10 years, and I've always seen that as just a huge eyesore and just, you know, chemically dangerous for the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So that's great. The transit report talked about having more bike parking, and you mentioned you might have it by the front door. I think that'd be a really good idea. So visitors who are biking there, you know, it's just more convenient to park by the front door than it is in some out-of-the-way place. So I think that would be a good idea. Let's see.
Did you have specific questions at this point? I think we're still
Okay, sure.
keeping it to questions right now.
Questions, sure. Okay, sure.
Thank you.
Sorry, Bean. Any other questions? Okay, so I've got some questions. Finally, I've got my list. I can ask questions. They're for you guys. So can you address why, and this is probably not for you. Well, yeah, well, you guys are up there. Is the 4 stories the same length along Sunnyside as it was during the sketch plan?
Essentially the same.
It is basically.
Quite a different design, as you see the two here. But so this wall is here is where it steps down. It's approximately the same.
You can see kind of the 3 bays here, and then we had it in the previous iteration. So it's essentially, you know, maybe a few inches different one way or the other, but yes, it's the same.
Okay. And did you kind of, because that seemed like that was kind of one of the main comments that, you know, reduce, step it down even further. Did you look at that potential?
We looked at that. I think in working with Ted, one thing that we did do is we reduced the number of units and made larger units so that we feel are more appealing to some potential renters in this area. We think that because of the way Sunnyside starts tilting up almost right at this divide here, that this was a pretty
Natural
good natural breaking point for it. So that's kind of how it landed there.
Okay, great. My other question was about the affordable housing units. So this might be a question for you who is sitting down. Can you explain why you're not providing the full number and are splitting it between units and money?
Well, it makes a lot of sense to have the ADA accessible units on the ground floor where there's 0 steps for residents so that they can, in a chair, enter and exit from a van into their unit without any steps. The rest of it is that, we are trying to drive a project with the residents and renters in mind, and we thought that it'd be a good split to basically buy in half and provide half as kind of a medium landing place on the affordable units.
Would it be possible to provide the full number of units there?
I think we certainly could provide the full number of units, but with a fiscally challenged site, where negotiations with other members here, we're receptive to anything to get this project built and do it the right way.
Thank you. I think that was it for my questions. Great. Thanks. Go.
On the cornice treatment of the 4-story building, is it the same as what you've done on the corner at the bay as it is on the brick portion? Are they identical?
I would say the profile is not identical, but it might be the same material. If you look at the just the depth, I guess I'll call it, of that versus the depth of this piece. It's deeper here, but both of them might be metal.
That's right. They're both metal. They're a little bit different just because one is on top of the kind of lantern expression, and we feel like that should be a little more finely detailed. And then the one above the brick we think is a little taller, more appropriate to the brick.
Which one's a little more taller?
If you look at the depth of this actually is taller. So this metal goes up a little bit higher than the brick does.
Right.
So this cornice will be deeper and taller than this one. Both of them having a top projection and a bottom projection, but I'll call it a flange, but maybe that's not the right word, but the flange piece and this one will be shallower than this piece.
Okay, there's something pleasing about the bay cornice. I'm calling it the bay, I don't know, the silver, on the silver, that it just looks
like a
so
cap.
plain.
On here?
Yeah.
Or you're saying you like it better over here?
Yeah, actually, there's
Not on
just
the
something
brick.
about it. I don't know if it's the proportion, the height, or the shadow, but, okay, I wanted to confirm that they were indeed two different, treatments.
Yep,
All right,
they
thank
are.
you.
Great, well, thank you.
Thank you.
So this is a public hearing, and is anyone who would like to speak? No? Just, as part of that, we have received, are you coming up? You can come.
Go ahead.
No, I was thinking nobody was coming up, so I was just going to say that just to let everyone know that we have received, several comments, like, I didn't count, but a lot. So we have received those, and just to let the public know. But yeah, come on up.
Hello, my name is Mark Schmidt. I live at 4011 Sunnyside Road. I just had a couple things I wanted to, a couple questions, and then also just a couple of things I wanted to bring up. There's a lot of things that I really want to love about the project. I know that people have worked hard at it. I still feel that the idea of flipping zones from R1, just because you can't get your development done within the parameters of the land you have to take two single-family homes that have been there since the 30s is a bad idea on principle for the morale of the community and the certainty of the surrounding homeowners. I get the vibe that ship has sailed. But I still think that's a problem, and I don't think that's good for the future of our city. Second thing I wanted to ask is, and it just kind of did come up at the end there, I'm not sure, is this a public park or is it a private park? A couple of the presentations say public park, but it's clearly not one. I don't know that it needs to be one. I'm not saying that, but I think it needs to be clear that it's not currently actually a public park. It's taking two private lots that are R1 and throwing them onto this development, which it looks nice, so that's not a problem. I just think there needs to be some clarity around what that actually means, and also then, whose responsibility is that from a safety standpoint? Is it patrolled by the owner? Is it is there security or doorman at this building, or is it just refer to police? I see a place like that. I lived in Chicago, and those pocket parks are sometimes very nice places and sometimes not very nice places. I mean, this is a much different neighborhood than that. I'm not too concerned about that, but you never know. It is on a pretty busy street, and at night I do see some kind of interesting things happening on France. The other thing I wanted to inquire a little bit more about was the parking spots thing that came up tonight. I'm not clear on that, whether is it or isn't it code compliant? It sounded to me like it is for just retail, but maybe not for restaurants, but we don't know what's going to be in there. So to me, I just don't understand where that sits. I think it would be nice to know if the use is really going to be a restaurant, is it compliant for that? Because if it's 20 to 25 overflow, like the SPAC consultant said tonight, there's only really one street, at least on the Edina side of the border, that's going to take that, and that's Sunnyside, and we are one side of the road parking, and that's pretty much 20 to 25 cars would be our entire street, and nowhere for us or our guests to park. So those are some of the issues I still think aren't totally resolved or addressed. I think maybe people might know what the answers to those questions. I just don't think they were necessarily answered yet tonight. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Oh, good evening. I agree wholeheartedly with Mike. He hit on some stuff that I didn't know he was going to bring up, but he hit on them right away.
Can you get your name? Sorry,
is
just
Kip
name.
Myrie, 4000 Sunnyside, right? Those two guys, I know them so well. Well, to me, it's still a big change, and I think they're going the right way. I like Bay Light and Breeze. If we can get something like that on Sunnyside, Bay Light, and the Breeze, to make it look like it's a comfortable spot, people would look at that and they'd say, wow, it's a great improvement. I really like it. I can't tell by those pictures up there if it's 3 or 2 stories on Sunnyside. Can somebody put that up for me, please? I'm going to probably take a little thank you. Yeah, right there. Is that one unit on top next to another unit, next to another unit, 3 units across and then 3 units under? That's 2 stories. Well, what's that dark stuff underneath? Right off the sidewalk. Beg your pardon?
Do you want me to answer it on the fly? Or? Okay. So units. Oh, yeah, sorry. Thank you. So, sir, on floors, this level here are units. And this level here are units, and then this is as the ground is rising, you actually are burying the parking. So you have about 6 to 7 feet of exposure. So your answer is both. It's 2.5 stories. So the ground is rising, and by the time you get to the edge, it's 2 stories. So that's a 2-story unit there, but it starts to just.
Okay. I know a lot of people are watching this tonight out there. They're not going to be so happy with 2.5, but I wanted to bring that to your attention. We were pushing for 2. Thank you very much for showing me that. I also like to see the study on the driving. The school buses are going to start up Tuesday. I live on Sunnyside. Tuesday gets hit from Eden Prairie buses. They get hit from Edina buses, and they go pretty fast across there. I would like to have a meter put up right off of my driveway with a squad car ready to go and catch these varmints that are going left and right up and down Sunnyside Road. And they're very, very fast. I stopped one guy one time. I said, do you know the speed limit here? He said, oh, yeah, we've got out of, oh, yeah, 65 miles an hour. And I said, well, there's the problem. We got people coming off of France going west. They don't even know what they're getting involved with. I just had a couple things here tonight, too. The Bay Lights, the garbage pickup, that wasn't even talked about. Where's the garbage going to be, and where's the smell coming from? And are you going to push a garbage truck out onto Sunnyside and have them take a left? Have them take a right. I think a lot of us out there want that. I'd like to have and see it on a Monday only. Like all the residentials are on Monday. Why should we have garbage truck Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, up and down Sunnyside? It doesn't work. And the drop off of kids, there's a lot of kids that we've picked up on the neighborhood. We've got 3 more babies on our street, right on Sunnyside. It's beautiful to see these little people. But anyway, and during the construction, which I'm sure it's going to go forward, I'd like to see the semis that are dropping off material for the renovation come up France and turn in on Sunnyside, not run down Sunnyside from the west and go east to France. I'd like to see that too. It'd be much quieter. Well, anyway, thank you very much. I have a little bit more, but I want people to get home tonight too. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Chris Dahl. I live at 4001 Sunnyside Road. So I will be, I guess, one door down from this project. I just want to say I do think Ted Carlson and his group have done a good job of listening to the community concerns about this project. I think it's improved from where it was. My concerns, and I think they've been addressed somewhat, but I am really concerned about the traffic issue, and especially that when we talk about pinch points, and they mentioned Saturday night. I think if you are on the corner of Sunnyside and France on Friday night in particular, Friday night more than Saturday night, it's kind of nutty with people going to Convention Grill, Hello Pizza. You got a lot of traffic over on 44th, people going to France 44. My concern is that with a potentially popular restaurant in this development, that could get even worse. And so I really, first of all, I'm wondering if the traffic report is going to be anywhere online that residents can be able to access that, because I would like to read that. But I'm really concerned about those kind of rush hour pinch points and how they could be affected by this development. Because I worry that 2 or 3 years from now, people might be coming back here complaining about how nutty it is on Friday nights and Saturday nights, and on Saturday mornings as well, especially in warmer weather when you have a lot of people biking, because that's a lot of traffic at that point as well. My other concern is about the entrance on Sunnyside. I would prefer to see something where people could only turn right out of that entrance and not go left into the neighborhood. And those are really my main concerns. But I appreciate you hearing me out, and I just want you to think about all the issues that the community has raised, because the people who live in this neighborhood love it. Everyone's a little bit resistant to change, but I think we're open to this project and what it could bring to the neighborhood. And just I want to be sure that everyone's thinking about everything that could be brought with this project. So thank you.
And as this person is coming up, Carrie, just the whole packet is on the website, right? So everyone could see the agenda for tonight and see the traffic study and
Correct.
All okay.
Correct, under the Planning Commission agenda.
Under the Planning Commission agenda. Okay, great. Thanks. Go ahead.
Hi, Brian Pankratz, 5429 Brookview Avenue. I think the project's being proposed is great. It fits the mixed use, walkability, streetscape, the park, greening up, the public art, everything that's kind of been talked about in the planning session, the different meetings, kind of fits into, the urbanism of, what we've been talking about, the, trying to get, kind of flow going down France Avenue. It's taking out all the curb cuts and things like that, and just think it's a great project and fits into the neighborhood and fits into Edina.
Anyone else?
I move to close the public hearing.
Is there a second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Motion carries. Great. So now we bring it back, and now we can talk about. Go.
I could answer a couple of questions
I was just gonna ask if you
that
could
were
do that.
asked. First, in regard to the parking requirements. So the project as proposed meets our parking standards for retail use. If they put a restaurant in there, they would be required to comply with our parking standards. Restaurant needs to provide one parking stall per 3 seats, plus the maximum number of employees on a maximum shift. So they would have to demonstrate that whatever restaurant they put in there meets our city code requirement. If it didn't, they would have the option to apply for a variance, and it comes before the Planning Commission again. So because we don't know specifically what they're asking for with a restaurant, there's no request for a variance at this time. The project is code compliant under retail, and potentially could be, depending on the size of the restaurant. The other question was in regard to the easements over the pocket park. So it would be privately owned, but easements would be required so it is available to the public. That is a condition that's outlined in the staff report for one of the conditions of approval of the project.
Thank you, Carrie.
Yeah, the other question was about the reports. The traffic study is posted online.
Okay. Great. So bringing it back to the Planning Commission for comments. Commissioner Salsko.
Yeah, I guess my comments to Mr. Carlson here. We have looked at this, maybe a third time or whatever, and you can see the improvements. Obviously, you're listening. There's been an enormous amount of public discussion, meetings, back and forth. I think what you presented tonight shows the results, and you're listening to that. I was particularly impressed with the before and after renditions of what had been presented before and the changes you made, and I thought you hit it right on the nose. The problems that exist, parking issues, traffic certainly are to be addressed and can be addressed, all very solvable. And the thing with the public realm, the park, boy, I'd leave that for further design considerations. You'll get that right, I'm sure. So I think I support this project. I think we're getting there.
Just a couple comments. I think the pocket park needs work. I think 680 square feet of grass is effectively useful for not a whole lot. You have a bunch of wood chips. I know the dog owners are going to go there. So to me, it's an amenity. I don't know what it is. It's art. It's not something I think it will get used very heavily. It's just doesn't seem to work that way. I wrestle quite a bit with that left turn out on the Sunnyside. I think realistically, this is on the eastern edge of Edina. If you block left turns out on the Sunnyside, you're blocking Edina residents, most of the city, from having to make that turn to get to their houses. So we're just going to go up and go to 44th and go across. So I don't think you're going to cut down any cut-through traffic from people trying to transit through Edina. It's really just other Edina residents you'd be forcing to go the other route. And I will tell you the route. We'll just go up to France and go down 44th. So you're just really pushing the problem onto somebody else's street. And as the traffic study indicates, it's not a significant amount of traffic as it's outlined. I think the big problem with this site is what is the use for this site, and I think since day one, the specter has been of would this be a Walgreens or a CVS, because it's a natural fit, it's a good site, it would do well, and it's perfectly permitted under current zoning and statute. So, as unfortunate as that sounds, I mean, that is really what we're faced at looking at, is what are we going to give to get, and what is the possibility we need to consider. So that, in my mind, is one of the things I weigh pretty heavily, and I appreciate that the Walgreens data was included in the traffic survey, because that would definitely be a detriment to the traffic in that neighborhood were that to become a pharmacy. I think the final thing I would add is also, I think in the construction plan, we need to, as we've done with other projects, mandate that all construction traffic needs to go on France and cannot go down the side roads. That's all I have.
Mr. Hamilton?
I think Edina is very fortunate to have a development team and a design team that's willing to put up with the threat of all those chairs that are back there and realize that through your hard work, those chairs are empty because people knew what you brought to the table, understand it, and appreciate it. And all I can say is I'm thrilled that they don't have to come. They don't have to come tonight. I think it's good for all of us. I think it's a wonderful show. Just for the fun of it, I just want to stick my oar in the water on the pocket park. I think one of the things about this building, that neighborhood is that retail area is used by the same people every day. The people that go there for coffee go there every day. They're going to go for coffee, and they're going to go across the street to the park they know, and they're going to sit there and drink coffee on their bench. And they're going to read their newspaper there because that's their park. So I don't think we have to worry too much about people discovering whether there's a park there or not and how to use it. I think it's going to become a front yard for lots of people that live in that neighborhood. And I think it's a delightful gift. I think we're very fortunate. Thank you.
Commissioner Berube?
We have seen several iterations of this, and I think that this latest one is a great improvement. It's much less boxy. It's a lot more attractive. I like the way that the front end, you described it like a beacon. I think that would be really, really attractive to the neighborhood. The few things that are issues, the pocket park, I appreciate that people in the neighborhood may think of it as their park. I wonder if there's things that we can do, and maybe as the city council listens to this, they can think through this and perhaps speak to it at their meeting too. Making this an art and education area to draw people in. So instead of just landscaping, which is beautiful, and I appreciate that in parks and would be drawn to it, but it also is, it's a deep and narrow, and maybe people need a reason to go to the back, and it could be more active, and we could see more people using it, which would increase the safety and interest if you had maybe rotating art displays by local residents or kids or something, maybe an education art component in there, which would be, enhance the public space and also be an asset to the community. So if you can think through that, I think that would be a real value add to the community. And then there are other things that were brought up that I think are valuable. The construction traffic being on France would be helpful. The garbage, keeping that away from the residences, whether it's the construction garbage or, on regular. We didn't speak to that, but I'm assuming it's back on the other side. If it's not, it should be. The other thing that we didn't speak to, I didn't bring it up because I didn't see it in the materials, but I guess I should have, and that is when you brought the plan last time, there was parking on Sunnyside, and Ted, you mentioned that you actually prefer parking on the street because you view it as activating and calming the street, which sounds counter to each other, but I know what you meant. I respectfully disagree with that and would much prefer to not have parking on the street. I don't know if there's time to address that now, but I would just propose that you don't have parking on the street, and perhaps City Council can bring that up when you bring it to them. I think the street's a lot more attractive without parking and would rather see that space used for landscaping or perhaps seating. Yeah, the bigger balconies and being more transparent and less boxy. And again, reducing the curb cuts on France Avenue, which was part of your plan from the beginning, I think is a great asset to the community. So thanks, I would strongly approve this.
Go for it. Since I cut you off before,
Okay.
now you can go.
All right, so, excuse me, in terms of the height and massing and everything, I think this project is fine. I would like to address issues of equity. So they've actually reduced the density of the housing here. So it looks like it's about 15% fewer units than they had before. So that affects both because I think originally it was going to entail all the affordable housing. It was going to meet the requirement without any payment. So I'm guessing that reduction in density means that there's less affordable housing there. Obviously, it also means that the housing that is there, the apartments themselves, well, no one was going to consider them truly like cheap or affordable or anything. They're even more expensive than they were before because there's 15% less of them. And then as you decrease density, that makes it harder to have have a lot of people using transit as an option. And this is one small, people think it's huge, right? But it's huge for the neighborhood, but you're going you're reducing it by 7 units, so that's not going to make or break a bus stop or anything. But in general, I think reducing density like that isn't necessarily a great thing. The second thing, we talk a lot about parking, and if it's a restaurant, what kind of parking is there. It sounds like the city requirements are that we have 1 spot per employee. And I think, we need to consider the fact that a cyclist was killed either this year or last year in St. Paul who worked at a restaurant. And a lot of restaurant people who work at restaurants don't necessarily have a lot of money, and a lot of them take transit and a lot of them bike. And that's sort of an equity issue. So I think anything we can do it'll solve 2 problems, right? We'll have fewer people driving there. We'll have 3 problems: fewer people driving there, fewer people parking there, and less congestion, right? So anything we can do to make the pedestrian and bicycle experience better, both on Sunnyside and on France, I think is a good thing. So those are equity issues. And so in terms of those issues, in terms of transportation issues, I think even if we can't get the pork chop removed, I think there are other things that could be done that could make that area better for pedestrians and cyclists. By the way, the reason, even if the pork chop reduces the length of area of the distance that a pedestrian has to walk, when you have a pork chop, you have to make 2 crossings, right? So you've got to look twice, and one of them is not signaled, right? So there are pros and cons of having a pork chop, and the newer transportation intersections, larger ones, tend to have, users actually have like 3 or 4 things that they have to cross. So the fewer they have to cross, the better. So other things we could do there would be having, if we can't get rid of the pork chop, is having no right on red, right? Or even having something like where they have on Excelsior Boulevard at Monterey and 36th or 38th, whatever that is, where you can't even go right on a green. There's a right red arrow, right? So I don't know that we have that much traffic making rights there, but it's a way, if the pork chop is there, it's a way of allowing a pedestrian to know they can cross without somebody running them over. So, I mean, as you've probably heard, there's been a lot of deaths in the Twin Cities for pedestrians and cyclists, and it's a real issue. And France is a county road, so it's very busy. Another possibility, and again, because it's not on France, I don't know if the county has any say into it, but raising the street on Sunnyside right before France, so that the crosswalk becomes a raised crosswalk. The city of Minneapolis, or the park board, one of them, did it recently at Harriet Park, Lake Harriet. When you go into, they used to have that little circle at the entrance to Lake Harriet where you would go in and park. They removed that circle, and now the bike path goes across there, and cars have to go over a bump in order to go into that parking area. So that's another way that you can do to. So I think there are things that we can do, and I think that we should push for that would make that safer. And then finally, I really do think that the most dangerous place for pedestrians and cyclists is at intersections. And I think having, I agree with Commissioner Berube that parking on the street isn't necessarily a great amenity at that spot. And if we could use that space for a bike lane, there's no room for a bike lane all along Sunnyside, but in that commercial area, giving a cyclist a dedicated safe space that's height separated from the road that would allow them to safely cross France Avenue, I think would allow a lot of people, would cause a lot more people to cross there. And I think that's what we're trying to do, as part of the comprehensive plan. I think it's to reduce the number of car trips per capita, right? We want to get as many people as possible walking and biking. And this is a perfect place. There's not a lot of places in Edina that it makes sense to do that, but this, 50th in France, that sort of thing, Grandview, where people live adjacent to supermarkets, liquor stores, places that they want to go, and they go every day, right? And places that you can take your kids and whatnot. So I think it's really imperative that we make that a very safe intersection.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Thanks. I have three things to discuss. First of all, I'd like to follow up on something that Chair Olson talked about regarding the comments we received, pro and con. We received a large number both ways, pro and con. And I want to thank everyone that commented and encourage people to comment more. The people that commented pro, I want to thank you. We do, in a lot of our public matters that we handle, we don't always get the positive feedback. We generally get more negative feedback. It's when people are mad as hell and not going to take it anymore, they actually get a letter. And so then we get letters or communications from a small portion of the population. I mean, most people don't communicate. And then we're wondering, okay, now how representative are these negative comments that we're receiving of what the whole population thinks? And it's helpful to get the positive communications. Now, that said, it's also very helpful to get the negative communications. I know when you get the negative communications, you're concerned about a project, and then you see the changes that are made, and you can be frustrating not to see everything being made. But I'm a firm believer that the best decisions are made when people are giving you negative information, when you're only getting positive information about how great something is. I believe that things are missed. And I believe that in this project and in almost everything I've seen, the negative communications that we receive, the concerns that have been raised, improve the project and improve the outcome. So I know when you're giving negative feedback that it often feels frustrating, but I want to, from my perspective, the feedback that we get helps inform our decisions and I think helps inform the project. So I hope that we just get more of both kinds of feedback, the negative feedback that helps to give feedback and the positive feedback that gives us a balanced perspective of what people are thinking. That said, there was one negative feedback that we received that it did kind of stick with me, and that is the worry about having a popular restaurant in the neighborhood. And that one I kind of struggle with. To me, having a popular restaurant neighborhood is a nice thing. I get the traffic. I get that it'll raise more traffic. But, I spent years living near Lucia's in Uptown, which is real traffic. But we, got a lot of foot traffic. And it was a real benefit to living in the neighborhood. So I understand the concerns that people are going to be driving from Browndale Avenue or from South Harriet Park or somewhere and coming through the neighborhood. I understand that. But I think they should recognize that having popular restaurants in the neighborhood is a attractive thing for the neighborhood, and it's nice. Ideally, that restaurant's just gonna be filled with neighbors, that are walking there at night and then going someplace, and maybe an ice cream shop opens up or something. I mean, that would be nice. The final comment I have has to do with the process on these give to get, and this is probably more for the city and city management, but I would encourage that we took some steps tonight about identifying the costs and the costs and the value going both directions. But I encourage us to take more detailed steps to better identify what value we're receiving, what value the developer's getting by the compromises the city's making. I think that will sharpen our thought processes, and I also think that will help communications with the public and give the citizens of Edina a better sense of why the deal is a good deal. It's not just someone's judgment, oh yeah, I like this development, or it's some people fears, I like this developer. It's, I looked at the deal and what the city was getting and how the citizens are benefiting. These are the values and this is what we're giving, and this is why it's a good purchase or good trade-off for the city. So I encourage that process to be more formalized and become more detailed. Thank you. Oh, I do support this project. I think the developer and the team has done a nice job, and I think on the whole this will be a benefit to the neighborhood. Thank you.
This is a really, in my mind, a critical project because it abuts so closely to the single-family neighborhood right around the corner. So we look at a lot of development proposals, and I'd say the majority of them are in generally commercial areas. The other unique thing about this is that it's a real opportunity to create something in this node, which it desperately needs. So in some ways, I feel a little disappointed with what I see as sort of a lost opportunity. The building, although it really has some great architectural features, I think it's getting there, but it really lacks what I think is sort of the charm of the area, and in some ways could be seen as a prototypical building that you'd find almost anywhere. So from that aspect, I am a little disappointed that it couldn't be a little more unique and specific to the area itself. It's getting there, like I said, but it feels more that it just it adds to the fabric, but doesn't really create it. The 4 stories, I think, is the right height at that location on France. It proceeds too far down Sunnyside into the residential district. I don't think that was the intent of the small area plan, and I think that comment has come up before. I don't feel it was addressed in this iteration. Having exit parking from the parking area onto Sunnyside, I think, is not a good design. In my mind, that has not been justified to my satisfaction that it must be there, as well as parking on the street. I think those are going to be detrimental to the neighborhood and the residential fabric. And again, I adhere to that strongly because Edina is about the neighborhoods. And so there are only so many areas where we come this close with residential, but abutting up to the commercial areas. And then the affordable units, absolutely, I think should be part of this project. It absolutely needs to be if this is to go forward. So I'm hoping that there's still some opportunity for improvement, but at this point, I cannot support this project.
Okay, so my turn. I like the project, so I am going to support it. But I would support it only on the condition that you do provide the affordable units at this location, all of them that are required, versus some of the splitting it with some of the units and then with some of the dollar amount. And the reason is I think this is, again, one of those ideal locations for affordable housing. It's walkable, there's transit, there's jobs. It's just really, so I understand what you're trying to do with the accessible units, and you've got those locations, but I really would like to see, what is it, like, what would go to 4 or 4.7 or something like that. Whatever, but I would like to see the full number of units. I understand the investment and all of that, but I would support it for that. I would also like to see more green in the pocket park. I remember, I think it was in the sketch plan, I kept going back and looking, but that it just showed all green, and that appeals to me. I like to have the benches and other improvements, but I would keep it as green as possible. As far as the parking on the street, it's already there. And I just, if we're already concerned about not enough parking and pushing parking into other neighborhood streets or in front of other people's homes, I say keep it. It's already there. We all use it. The access to Sunnyside, I can't imagine not having that. And all of that going on to France, which is already, the queues are back on that. I just don't see how it would work. Again, you have access points on Sunnyside, and I support having it on that. One of the other things, the construction, if we are moving forward with this, Carrie, is this the time to add where construction traffic can be? Does this not come back to us again?
Correct.
Okay. Anyway, those are my comments.
May I make a motion? I move for approval of the preliminary zoning and preliminary development plan as outlined in the staff memo, subject to 3 additional conditions. Condition number 14, construction plan restricts traffic only to France Avenue. Condition 15, property, to the effect that property owner requires all commercial deliveries to be done in non-peak hours. That can be done in a lease. And 16, all affordable housing requirements to be met on location.
So that would include striking condition 7.
Yes.
Is there a second? We have to second it. Okay. Second's been made. Discussion?
So I think that resolution makes a lot of sense. The one question I do have is about the affordable housing. I totally agree with where you're coming from, but my understanding from the affordable housing coordinator for the city of Edina is that the way this is split up may be her preferred path at this time, and so I'm okay with the division in this project for that reason. So I would be okay without having that affordable housing condition because of what the City of Edina Affordable Housing Coordinator has said.
Yeah, in terms of the affordable housing, yes, she did say that, but I think this is such a small node that there's not a lot of places to put affordable housing. And if we don't put it in every single multi-unit building that we have, then we're going to have, one building that's going to be affordable housing that, will be the scarlet letter, which is something we don't want. The other thing is that I couldn't vote for those amendments unless there was also one about improving the bike and pedestrian infrastructure. So.
Amendment to add that?
I don't know what that means, unfortunately.
Well, that's so. So I'm new to this, so I'm not sure how I would phrase it. But it definitely needs, and I don't know if this is the city does and the developer just helps pay for it, or the developer does it, or what. But the things I was talking about, like either making sure the pork chop is gone, or no right on red, or raising the sidewalk. I mean, things that putting a bike lane in. I would need at least 2 of those things in order to vote for this. So I don't know how I would, and I don't know what the timelines are, how that gets done.
We might suggest that you recommend that staff work with the county, the applicant, to explore ways to improve pedestrian and bike safety in the intersections in the area.
Yeah, see, explore doesn't mean
doesn't
accomplish.
Guarantee.
Right. And so I feel strongly enough that I think there would have to be something there.
Then we would need a specific
Okay.
recommendation.
So the people who made the motion, do you accept that?
I will not accept that.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so we have a motion and a second.
Just
No.
quickly to get some clarification on the restricting the construction traffic to just France. Does that mean no portion of Sunnyside? So they may need to make that
The
left turn
intention was
just
the
to.
main
They
egress
can't
exit
go
from the node, not to go down Sunnyside, but obviously they'll need to probably get up Sunnyside. Yeah.
I think you know my feeling about affordable housing, and I'd certainly like to see it. I'd like to see it on the site. I think this developer's worked exceedingly hard to try to balance all the issues that are there. There is a financial constraint eventually that you cross the line. At what point do we tie hands and take quality out of a project in order to achieve a specific goal? I think that on top of Commissioner Nemiroff's point that the Edina Affordable Housing Coordinator has already said that what they have proposed is in alignment with her philosophy. It just doesn't seem a necessary hurdle to jump at this late date to try to put all that one more layer of pieces in there. Is it a good thing to have? Yes, it's a good thing to have. Can we say we'd like to have it and we would like to see it there? Yes, but to make it a condition for approval is a road too far for me.
Yes, just for the chair's benefit, we spent a good part of our work session, 5:30 to 7, talking about affordable housing, and I think I would just like to reaffirm Commissioner Hamilton's and Ian's comments.
Specifically this project.
Well, about the set aside of money for affordable housing.
Yep.
And so I think the issue is in front of the city council. So I think we need to talk about that some more, because we are, okay, that's.
So to be clear, we didn't specifically talk about this proposal as she was acceptable to this specific proposal. She's accepting of the idea, the notion of accepting cash in certain instances to provide affordable housing elsewhere.
We have a motion and a second. So should we just do the call on this one? Do you think we need to go down the line? Do you know how to do that? What? Sure.
Could I ask one thing before we do that? Would it be possible to bifurcate the motion and vote on everything but the affordable housing component, vote on that separately? Because I think that a lot of the votes are going to align except on that issue. And it would be great to at least agree, get a consensus, as close to consensus we can on as much as we can, and then deal with the separate issues.
My preference would be to vote on the motion, and if that motion fails, vote on another motion, as opposed to bifurcating and pulling things in and out. I think it's just, because we're not voting to deny, we're voting for approval, so we can certainly bring up another motion that threads the needle.
The downside to that proposal is if it doesn't pass, then it's unclear when you simply look at the black and white issue why it didn't pass. We'll know, they'll know, but if you weren't here, you won't know.
If it doesn't pass, can someone offer a new motion?
Yes, we'll have to.
Okay, let's do that.
Condition 16 is all affordable housing provision units must be on site. They're correct, it's just for the leaseholders. Yep.
So if you want to just walk down and everyone, so the motion.
So Commissioner Miranda?
No, nay, whatever.
Commissioner Lee?
Nay.
Commissioner Thorson?
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss?
Nay.
Commissioner Namrau?
Nay.
Commissioner Hamilton?
Nay.
Commissioner Berube?
No.
Chair Olson?
Aye.
Could I make a separate, a different motion then? If that's the case, could I make the same motion except without the affordable housing component?
Second.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Miranda?
Nay.
Commissioner Lee?
Nay.
Commissioner Thorson?
Aye.
Commissioner Strauss?
Aye.
Commissioner Nemerov?
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Commissioner Berube.
Aye.
Chair Olson.
Nay. So it passes. Right?
5-3.
5-3. Got it.
This will go to the city council on October 2nd.
Thanks, Chad. Did you say October 2nd?
Correct.
Seems kind of a gap.
There is. A little bit bigger gap here.
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to keep going because it's getting late. So the next agenda item is the community comment. Is there anyone here for community comment? That was a slam
Motion to
door.
close public comment.
Thank you. Is there a second? All in favor? Aye. Reports and recommendations, anything? Why do we have that on here? Has there ever been a report and
Sketch plans are put under
Oh,
reports
got
and
it.
recommendations,
Okay.
studies.
Thank you. Correspondence and petitions. Is that the one I'm always saying that we should probably get rid of? That's probably it. Any correspondence and petition? Okay, that's the one we need to get rid of. Chair and member comments, any? Go for it. Oh, you-
I was just going to mention, for anybody who's still listening and the city council, I think if you watched this and heard the vote that this passed without the affordable housing when it didn't pass with the affordable housing, that we could be misconstrued to not be supportive of affordable housing. I think we're all influenced by the work session we had before this meeting and better understanding how affordable housing works and how the financing works and what the feasibility is of affordable housing in Edina. And so I think it's important that people are clear that I can speak for myself, and I believe I'm speaking for the rest of the commission in saying we're supportive of affordable housing, and to not misconstrue that vote as us not being supportive of affordable housing.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Here, let me just pass these around. I have a flyer here. It is about, which we have heard probably previously referred to as missing middle housing, which is an issue that is coming up in front of us as part of our housing chapter. It is an issue where we're looking at, we don't have the sort of interim affordable housing units that are of different types, not just apartments, not just rentals, but all different types of housing. That is rapidly disappearing throughout our whole country as well as in our own community. We are lucky to have this seminar coming up by the speaker is Daniel Parolic. He's actually the person who coined that term. So I just wanted to share that information. Is there a date on here? Okay, well, it's September something, so sorry it's not on here. That's odd. I will get the date to you, but as I recall, it's sometime in September, and he will be coming to the Twin Cities to speak, so it might be a good thing to put on your calendar and attend. Thanks.
Thanks.
I always have comments. So I went to, well, first of all, I'm seeing a lot more bicycle parking on 44th and France, or people using bicycles and parking them 44th and France and 50th and France, because those are the two nodes that I shop at all the time. And I've tweeted pictures where it's basically full at both places. So we're seeing, and I think if you just look around the city, you see a lot more people walking and biking than you did, say, 5 or 10 years ago. And recently I was at Lunds and Byerly's at 50th and France. And this woman was trying to orchestrate her 3 very small children who were all on bicycles into the parking lot and getting, parking spaces. And then I was actually driving. I wasn't biking there. And after I parked in one in the store, I happened to meet her in the store, and I introduced myself so I didn't seem like a creep asking her questions. Because I'm like, where do you live in? I assume she lives in Minneapolis because everyone's like, well, nobody in Edina does that. It's people from Minneapolis coming over. And she said, no, I live in Edina. And I asked her how far away she lived, and she said, and I was expecting a block or two, because, these kids are tiny, right? And they're riding their bikes, and they're having a great time, And she said, no, I live in Edina, and it's about a mile away. And I thought, oh my God, how do you get, all 3 kids going? And she said, yeah, it's sort of like herding cats. It's a lot of work. But, obviously it's important for her to teach her kids how to bicycle and to go. I was really surprised that you would take kids that small, across whatever, Halifax or 50th or France to get there, or more than one. So I think that shows, and I've been in other places. I was biking the 9 Mile Creek Trail a week or so ago, and there's a woman there with 2 small children, and she's teaching them. I'm behind her, and it's actually right by 7200 France. And I'm listening to her, and I'm listening to her teach her children, how to do things. And people tend to be much more cautious than how we train people to ride bikes, right? So, especially with small children, right? So she's telling them to wait for cars to turn, even though they have the right of way, right? Cars turning left onto France in front of them. She's letting all the traffic go, and she's teaching her children this, right? And even when we crossed a curb cut to go into a commercial building, she told them to just let the cars go, even though technically they have the right of way. And so people, want to feel safe. They want to feel like they can go places in Edina, and more people are doing it. And granted, it's generally younger people with children, and if we want to continue to have these people move into Edina or shop in Edina, it's imperative that we make it easier and safer for them to do this sort of thing. So that's why I seem like a one-topic kind of person, but I look around and I see people biking and walking all the time in Edina, and people biking on the sidewalk because they don't feel safe biking on the street. So I think we have to push a lot harder to make sure that the streets are safe for residents.
Found the date.
Sorry, I realize this is not the flyer, so let me just give you a little more background. It's sponsored by the AIA St. Paul chapter and the AARP of Minnesota. It will be held on Wednesday, September 26th, 5:30 p.m. is the cocktail hour, and 7 p.m. begins the presentation. It will be held at the Minnesota History Center, and that is called Missing Middle Housing, Responding to the Demand for Walkable Urban Living. A presentation by Dan Perolic from Opticos Design. September 26th.
And
it's a Wednesday night.
Is it free?
It is, I believe. Yes, it is. But you have to RSVP. Cost free. Registration's required.
Is that a planning night, though?
Pardon?
It's not a planning night?
Oh. Are we?
Yeah.
Yeah. If I'm not here, you know where I am.
Motion to adjourn?
Favor? Aye. Thanks.
We'll be here till 2 in the morning without.